It's nighttime. The world outside has quieted down, but here you are, in your favorite bed, dim lamp flickering, maybe a cup of something warm beside you. Tonight, you're not going to just read about ancient Rome. You're going to step into it, into streets crowded with chatter, dust, and the occasional stench of the Tiber River. But beware, Rome was not only grand, it was meticulously, obsessively legalistic. And some of those laws? Well, they're downright bizarre. Picture this. The Forum is alive. Senators strut about in togas, their sandals clicking against the stones. Citizens argue over property, trade, and civic duties. A magistrate shouts at a vendor for spilling wine on a toga. Yes, spilling wine could actually get you fined. A baker frets over weights and measures. Someone's terrified of accidentally urinating in public. Meanwhile, children run past, narrowly avoiding punishment for making noise too close to a temple. Everything is regulated, codified, and sometimes ridiculously specific. You might think of Rome as gladiators, emperors, and triumphal arches, and yes, those exist, but beneath the grandeur lies a society obsessed with rules. Laws governed everything: who you could marry, how you could mourn, what color toga you could wear, even whether you were allowed to vomit after a feast. And these rules were enforced with a seriousness that would make modern lawyers shiver. Some were practical, some protective, some terrifyingly harsh, and some are just plain funny. Tonight, we're going to explore those strange laws that dictated funerals and mourning ceremonies, controlled the use of public restrooms, baths, and yes, vomiting. Regulated marriage, inheritance, and family squabbles with absurd precision. Governed clothing, entertainment, and even your behavior in the streets. Created loopholes, inspired clever cheats, and occasionally forced the populace to scratch their heads in disbelief. And as you follow me through this journey, remember, you're not just learning about history. You're walking in the sandals of Romans who argued, bribed, panicked, and sometimes laughed their way through one of the strangest legal systems in human history. You'll meet magistrates scolding citizens over tiny infractions, merchants calculating fines with trembling hands, and ordinary Romans doing their best to navigate a world where breaking a law could mean shame, a fine, or even exile. And sometimes it meant nothing at all. So get comfortable. Pull the blanket a little closer. Let your mind settle. Tonight, we step into the shadows of Rome. Not its grandeur, but its peculiar, meticulously ruled, occasionally ridiculous legal world. By the end of this journey, you'll know Rome was not only an empire of conquest and architecture, it was an empire of rules, regulations, and bizarre legislation that would make you double-check your own laws today. And now, the gates of the Forum are open. You're here. Don't look away. You step into the heart of Rome long before emperors like Caesar or Augustus dominate the history books. The city is alive with noise. Carts clatter over cobblestones. Vendors shout from stalls piled high with olives, bread, and garum. And children dart between adults, screaming as they chase one another through the Forum. Dust hangs in the air, mixed with the faint scent of river water from the Tiber. And above it all, magistrates in white togas with purple stripes stride purposefully, wielding scrolls and wooden staffs as though they were extensions of their very fingers. Rome is bustling, and it's obsessively legal. You might assume that in a society so preoccupied with empire building, architecture, and conquest, laws would be vague, flexible, or easily ignored. Not so. Early Romans loved rules. They worshipped them, codified them, and argued about them endlessly. The foundation of this obsession comes from one of Rome's most enduring legacies, the 12 Tables, the first attempt to write down Roman law for all citizens. Imagine it. A group of elders, stern and slightly bewildered, huddled over clay tablets, chisel in hand. They are tasked with translating centuries of oral traditions, customs, and disputes into concrete, tangible laws. Every line carved into clay carries the weight of order, justice, and control. But here's the catch. The Romans wanted these laws not just fair, but visible, permanent, and impossible to argue with, or at least that was the plan. The 12 Tables cover everything: family, property, debt, funerals, crime, and public behavior. They are practical, yes, but they are also eccentric. One law might state, in effect, if a man breaks into a home at night and is caught, he shall be put to death. Another, if a father kills his son for theft, he is free from punishment. You pause for a moment. Wait, what? Yes. Roman law, even in its infancy, had a sharp edge, favoring order and hierarchy over modern notions of fairness. In the streets, magistrates enforce these laws with precision. A baker accidentally shortchanges a customer? A fine. A man urinates near the forum? Another fine, plus public humiliation. Children caught fighting over a stick might find themselves paraded before the elders. Life in early Rome is rigorous, orderly, and sometimes terrifying because the laws are carved in stone, literally, and ignored at your peril. The forum itself is a theater of civic life. Citizens gather to listen to magistrates read the law aloud, their voices echoing between columns and temples. A scribe quickly copies down important announcements onto small tablets for the record, though many Romans rely on memory. The crowd murmurs, nods, and occasionally boos when a law seems unfair. A particularly stubborn merchant protests loudly, "How am I supposed to sell cheese if the law forbids me from placing my cart near the fountain?" Magistrates glare, and the crowd laughs nervously. Humor, even in this rigid society, creeps through the cracks. But why did the Romans bother codifying law at all? Before the 12 Tables, law existed mainly in custom and oral tradition. Interpretations could vary wildly depending on which magistrate heard your case. Wealthy patricians often had the advantage, twisting precedent to suit themselves. Plebeians, common citizens, demanded clarity, fairness, and transparency. So the 12 Tables were written, displayed in the Roman Forum for all to see. In effect, they shouted, "Here is the law. Ignore it at your own peril." And yet, clarity did not mean simplicity. Some of the laws seem utterly bizarre to modern sensibilities. There are rules specifying who can inherit property, who may marry whom, and even under what circumstances a father may punish a child. Laws exist to prevent theft, but they also regulate behavior down to the minutest detail: fences, livestock, and market disputes. The Romans were meticulous, almost absurdly so. A cow wandering into your neighbor's garden could spark a legal case. A broken fence? Another. A debt? Unpaid? Another still. Every action, every mishap, every human foible was potentially subject to judgment. Now imagine being a Roman citizen trying to navigate this world. You wake up to the crowing of a rooster, step into your sandals, and attempt to conduct your daily business without incurring fines or legal disputes. You pass a magistrate who eyes you critically. Did you dump your leftover wine correctly? Did you walk too close to a temple? Did your neighbor's goat graze too near your property line? Every gesture, every action is scrutinized. Order is paramount, and the law is everywhere, silent but firm, shaping the rhythm of daily life. And yet, Romans were human. They found ways to bend the rules, exploit loopholes, and occasionally laugh at the absurdity of it all. Stories abound of citizens arguing clever points before magistrates, avoiding fines through technicalities, and navigating the labyrinthine system with ingenuity. The law is rigid, but human creativity is boundless. In fact, some of the most famous Roman legal cases involve clever loopholes, dramatic debates, and public spectacle, reminding us that even in a society obsessed with rules, human nature finds a way. Beyond the streets, laws shape family and society in deeply personal ways. Fathers wielded immense authority under the concept of patria potestas, controlling property, marriage arrangements, and even life and death decisions within their households. You imagine a Roman household in the early morning, children stirring, servants preparing food, and a father reading aloud from a tablet, reminding everyone of their duties. A minor infraction, breaking a cup, wandering into a threatened room, could have serious consequences. And yet, despite the severity, Romans relied on humor, negotiation, and cunning to survive these rules. Life was both constrained and endlessly complicated. And here's something fascinating. The 12 tables were not meant to remain static. They were constantly interpreted, debated, and expanded upon. As Rome grew, from a city-state to a sprawling empire, laws evolved, sometimes logically, sometimes eccentrically. Magistrates, jurists, and scholars wrestled with contradictions, overlapping decrees, and unusual precedents. Some laws became outdated, some were outright ignored, others were applied with terrifying literalness. And so began the uniquely Roman relationship with law: reverence, fear, creativity, and absurdity all intertwined. Humor, dark and subtle, plays its part. Picture a Roman citizen fined for failing to secure his chickens properly. He argues before the magistrate, citing obscure passages from the 12 tables. The magistrate frowns, clearly puzzled. The crowd giggles. A neighboring citizen whispers, "If only the law covered lost sandals as well." Everyday absurdities like this remind us that even the most rigid legal system is only as sensible as the humans who enforce and challenge it. By the end of the day, the city quiets somewhat, dust settling on the forum, merchants packing up, and magistrates returning to their offices to review cases. Yet the law never sleeps. It remains carved in stone, etched into minds, whispered in conversation, and looming over every Roman action. It shapes society, behavior, and culture in ways both practical and surreal. And for us, looking back, it's impossible not to marvel at the combination of order, obsession, and absurdity. The birth of Roman law is not just the story of rules, it's the story of how a civilization sought to impose logic on human chaos, often in the strangest ways. So, as you sit back, lamp flickering beside you, consider this. The streets of Rome were alive with life, laughter, and law. Every citizen, from the wealthiest patrician to the lowliest plebeian, moved through a world dictated by tablets of clay, magistrates' commands, and a system simultaneously rational and ridiculous. And though the laws of the 12 tables are ancient, their spirit lives on, in human obsession with rules, in clever ways to bend them, and in the eternal tension between order and chaos. Tonight, as we continue, we will meet the bizarre, terrifying, and sometimes hilarious laws that governed every aspect of Roman life, from vomit and urination to marriage, inheritance, and entertainment. Because in Rome, nothing escaped the reach of the law, and sometimes the law itself escapes reason. The streets of Rome grow quieter as dusk settles, the forum's marble columns casting long, flickering shadows. The air carries a faint chill, mingled with the faint tang of incense from temples. Tonight, the city whispers of something inevitable, something that touches every citizen, rich or poor, patrician or plebeian, death. And in Rome, death was never a private matter. It was public, regulated, and, strangely enough, occasionally absurd. The Romans took funerals seriously. They took them so seriously that breaking the laws around death could get you fined, shunned, or worse, haunted by angry spirits. Picture a Roman cemetery just outside the city walls. Families gather around modest graves, priests mutter prayers, and offerings are laid carefully on stone altars. This is no chaotic scene, it's a highly regulated event. There are rules about how far from the city walls bodies could be buried, rules about who could participate in processions, and laws that even dictated the length and number of mourners allowed in a funeral. Overspending was frowned upon, and flaunting wealth could attract legal consequences or public scorn. One particularly infamous law forbade extravagant tombs within the city limits. Imagine a wealthy Roman attempting to erect a grandiose monument, marble glistening in the sun, complete with statues, columns, and an eternal flame. Magistrates would swoop in, citing statutes, shaking scrolls, and lecturing the citizen on moderation. The citizen protested, "But I am honoring my family." And the magistrate's response, deadpan, "You may honor your family, but not in a way that makes your neighbor bankrupt from envy." Humor, though subtle, flavored the strict enforcement. And funerals weren't the only regulated aspect of death. Romans believed in the power of ghosts, spirits that lingered if proper rituals weren't followed. A body improperly buried could become a restless shade, haunting the living. There were laws about burning or cremating the dead, about which cemeteries could be used, and even about the order of the procession to prevent offending the gods. Priests, augurs, and city officials monitored compliance closely, ensuring no missteps would anger spirits or law enforcement. One evening, you imagine a scene, a middle-class family preparing a burial. The father anxiously adjusts his toga, ensuring the correct number of mourners walk behind the bier. The mother checks the offerings: 3 loaves, 2 small jars of wine, 1 piece of incense. The children watch nervously, aware that even a single mistake, misplaced candle, improperly recited prayer could bring fines or spiritual misfortune. A neighbor peeks over the wall, muttering, "If the magistrate sees this, you'll pay dearly." The family shuffles in, tense, silent coordination, humor mingling with anxiety. Dark comedy threads through this strictness. Romans were so obsessed with order and death that laws existed about funerary noise. Too loud, and the ceremony disturbed the peace. Too quiet, and the mourning appeared insufficient. Town criers patrolled streets to ensure compliance. Imagine a chorus of wailing women and flutes carefully measured to the decibel of civility, a funeral orchestra regulated by law. The absurdity is almost Shakespearean: grief controlled, quantified, and publicly adjudicated. Then there were laws about who could witness a funeral, a detail that might seem trivial today but was critically important in Rome. Only certain citizens were allowed to attend certain burials. Attendance by the wrong person could spark social scandal or legal penalty. And yes, even clothing at funerals was regulated. Mourners were expected to wear appropriate garments, neither too opulent nor too threadbare. Purple? Reserved for the elite. Too much jewelry? That was ostentation, punishable by law. And the dead themselves weren't free from legal oversight. Their estates were meticulously inventoried, property distributed, debts collected, and sometimes disputes erupted over inheritance, laws that required precise documentation. You can imagine the scene: a family gathered around the will, a magistrate holding a scroll, and a heated argument over a single pot of gold or a plot of land. Laws dictated exactly how these disputes were resolved. Sometimes, though, clever relatives found loopholes, manipulating legal wording to seize property without technically breaking the law. Even ghosts had regulations. Romans believed that improper burial rites could anger spirits, but the law also stepped in to prevent superstition from descending into chaos. Priests could fine a family for neglecting rituals, and public officials ensured that funerals adhered to civic decorum. In this way, law, religion, and fear were inseparable. Follow the statute, appease the spirits, and maintain order. Ignore it, and misfortune, or worse, public disgrace, could follow. Imagine a magistrate patrolling the forum at dusk, torch in hand, eyes sharp for funerary missteps. A man attempts to carry a body without the required attendants. The magistrate approaches, voice booming, "Stop! That is against Table 3 of the 12 tables. You will pay a fine and arrange the proper ceremony, or risk spiritual and legal consequences." The man bows sheepishly, muttering about confusing regulations, while onlookers smother laughter at the awkward scene. In Rome, law was ever present, ever watchful, and sometimes absurdly precise. Romans also regulated mourning periods. Widows had to observe specific durations of grief. Failure to comply could provoke suspicion of impropriety or impiety. Mourning customs weren't merely social, they were enforceable. Priests and magistrates monitored adherence, writing down infractions, and occasionally fining citizens for being too eager to return to daily life. The human need for grief clashed with legal mandates, producing countless stories of awkward compliance and creative circumvention. And then there were the funerary games, another peculiar intersection of law, society, and death. Public spectacles honoring the deceased had rules dictating timing, seating, and participation. Step out of line, and you could face fines, or worse, be physically removed from the event. Yet Romans, ever resourceful, found ways to bend these rules. Disguises, clever scheduling, and the occasional bribe ensured that families could honor their dead while technically obeying the law. The absurdity of human ingenuity meets legal rigidity again and again. By the end of the chapter, you begin to sense the pattern. Romans codified life in excruciating detail, but death was no exception. Every ritual, Every gesture, every incense stick was potentially regulated. The law penetrated into private grief, public mourning, and even the afterlife itself. Absurd? Absolutely. Terrifying? Sometimes. Fascinating? Without a doubt. And here's the final twist. These laws were rarely static. They evolved with society, responding to scandals, public complaints, and shifts in religious practice. Some decrees were forgotten, others were applied literally with terrifying strictness. Citizens had to adapt continually, navigating a labyrinth of funeral rites, burial rules, and ghostly precautions. To live in Rome was to live under law, even in death. So, as you sit back in your chair, imagining the smell of incense, the bustle of the forum, and the eerie hush of a Roman cemetery, consider this. The Romans didn't just control the living, they legislated the dead. They believed that every misstep could ripple through the city, angering gods, neighbors, and spirits alike. And sometimes they were right. Because in Rome, laws weren't just rules. They were the invisible scaffolding of society, holding the city upright, even as they sometimes seemed absurd, terrifying, or darkly comedic. And now, as we step forward, we leave the cemeteries behind and enter a world even stranger, the laws that governed vomit, urine, and the curious bodily infractions of everyday Roman life. You may want to cover your nose, but you won't want to look away. Imagine stepping into the bustling streets of Rome, midday. The sun blazes down on the forum, glinting off marble columns and the polished sandals of citizens. Vendors shout, hawking olives, bread, and the ever-popular garum. Horses clop over cobblestones, and children weave through the crowds, laughing. Everything seems vibrant, normal, except for the fact that in Rome, your own body could land you in legal trouble. Yes. Your stomach, your bladder, even your natural impulses were subject to laws more absurd than most of us could imagine today. Picture a festival. Citizens have feasted for hours, reclining on couches, indulging in multiple courses washed down with wine. The air is heavy with food, sweat, and excitement. Suddenly, a citizen succumbs to excess. He vomits onto the floor. Chaos? Perhaps. But more importantly, he's technically broken the law. Romans had specific rules about vomiting in public, designed both to maintain public decorum and to prevent the spread of disease. Vomiting outside the designated latrines or areas could bring fines, or worse, public humiliation. The absurdity of this law becomes clear as you walk through the scene. Magistrates patrol the festival grounds with scrolls in hand, eyes scanning for infractions. A man bends over a fountain, eyes watering, trying to discreetly vomit after one too many cups of wine. A magistrate approaches, voice booming. "Stop. You are in violation of Table 4. Use the designated vomitorium or face a fine." The crowd laughs nervously, some holding their stomachs to hide their own discomfort. Even in bodily failure, Roman law asserts itself. Public urination was another legally regulated offense. Latrines existed, yes, but not every corner of the city was fair game. If a man urinated against a wall in a busy street, he could be fined or even publicly shamed. And here's the kicker. Some laws required fines to be proportional to the social status of the violator. A wealthy patrician might pay a hefty sum, a common plebeian less. But the shame? That was universal. Now, imagine a young Roman citizen, desperate and squirming, trying to find a discreet corner in the crowded forum. Every alley is watched, every step potentially illegal. He glances nervously at a magistrate nearby, muttering excuses under his breath. The magistrate shakes his head, writing the offense in a leather-bound ledger. Humor mingles with human discomfort. Rome turns even nature into a performance under law. And it wasn't just about discipline. These laws were practical, too. The Romans cared about hygiene, sanitation, and public health in ways that sometimes seem surprisingly modern. Laws regulating vomit and urine prevented contamination, discouraged unsanitary practices, and maintained civic order. Yet, from our perspective, the specificity of these rules, detailed, sometimes pedantic, can feel absurd. Some laws even regulated drinking behavior, especially during public festivals. Citizens were expected to maintain decorum while consuming wine, lest overindulgence lead to public chaos. Magistrates could fine those who became too loud, rowdy, or, ironically, too drunk to behave in a socially acceptable manner. Imagine the frustration of trying to enjoy a feast while calculating your every sip to avoid legal trouble. Dark humor threads through this system. One can picture a magistrate scolding a citizen who accidentally vomits on a statue of Jupiter. Do you mock the gods? Pay the fine and apologize in triplicate. The citizen bows, cheeks red, while the crowd snickers behind their hands. In Rome, law was not only enforcement, it was theater. Children were not exempt. A child caught urinating in public might face corrective instruction, fines imposed on the parents, or public reprimand. Citizens of all ages had to navigate these bodily regulations, learning early that natural impulses were secondary to public order. And yet, clever Romans found ways to bend the rules. A discreet corner, a well-timed distraction, or a sympathetic magistrate could turn a legal headache into a minor inconvenience. Ingenuity always finds a way, even in matters of the bladder. The absurdity extended to social hierarchy. Patrons, slaves, and freedmen were all subject to different rules, or enforced differently. A patrician vomiting at a feast might receive a private warning. A plebeian doing the same in the street could be fined and publicly shamed. The law codified social inequality as much as bodily function. And of course, humor was inevitable. Citizens whispered jokes, made exaggerated gestures, and told stories of the worst offenders. One man's infamous festival vomiting became the subject of gossip for weeks. Another's public urination was recounted with dramatic flair by street performers. Even magistrates could not resist sharing a wry smile at human folly, though they never admitted publicly. Yet beneath the humor, there was seriousness. Hygiene mattered, order mattered. Romans understood that bodily regulation affected public health, urban cleanliness, and the smooth functioning of society. Laws, even absurd ones, served a practical purpose, though their specificity, to our modern eyes, often reads like satire. Now, imagine the interplay between law and human nature. Citizens attempted to comply while enjoying life, balancing pleasure with obligation. Festival games continued. Citizens ate, drank, and laughed, yet always aware that a magistrate might be watching. The tension between enjoyment and legal compliance created a uniquely Roman social dynamic, blending fear, humor, and ingenuity. Stories abound of clever circumvention. A merchant might strategically place a curtain to avoid public urination fines, or citizens might feign illness to dodge a magistrate's scrutiny. Loopholes became part of daily life. Law was rigid, but human creativity was infinite. And herein lies the charm, the absurdity, and the enduring fascination of Roman law. By evening, the festival quiets, the sun dipping behind temples and arches. Citizens stagger home, some embarrassed, others relieved, a few smug at having outwitted the magistrates. The forum is emptying, but the laws linger in the air, invisible, watchful, and occasionally ridiculous. And so, as you sit comfortably, imagining this world of rules for vomit, urine, and drunken misadventures, you realize something. Roman law was more than enforcement. It was a framework for society, a game of compliance and creativity, and a constant reminder that even the most human of actions, eating, drinking, relieving oneself, were part of the social contract. Next, we will move from bodily offenses to the laws that governed marriage, divorce, and the peculiar world of Roman family roles. If you thought public vomiting was strange, wait until you meet the legal hoops your ancestors jumped through to wed, inherit, or survive family life. The sun rises over Rome, casting a golden glow on the rooftops, temples, and bustling streets. The city awakens, citizens stirring, merchants opening their stalls, and children chasing one another through narrow alleys. But today, we turn our attention not to marketplaces or public forums, but to something far more personal, the tangled, bizarre, and legally regulated world of Roman family life. In Rome, family was everything. The household, domus, was the central unit of society, the foundation of wealth, power, and social identity. And the law? It infiltrated every corner of domestic life, dictating who could marry whom, how marriages were arranged, what dowries were acceptable, and what to do in case of infidelity or divorce. In short, Romans were not just citizens, they were constantly navigating a legal maze inside their own homes. Step into a patrician household on a typical morning. The father, pater familias, strides through the atrium, sandals clapping against marble. He carries a scroll, reviewing the family ledger, noting property, debts, and obligations. His wife tends to the hearth, children gather breakfast, and a tutor hovers over the youngest, ensuring proper education. Every household member is subject to the authority of the paterfamilias, whose power is both absolute and codified by law. He can arrange marriages, control inheritance, and even punish children with severe consequences, all under the framework of Roman law. Marriage, in particular, was highly regulated. Citizens did not simply marry for love, though love could play a part. It was a civic and legal obligation, a means of preserving property, alliances, and social standing. Arranged marriages were common, especially among the elite. Families negotiated dowries, inheritance rights, and social contracts with the precision of modern lawyers, sometimes to absurd extremes. A father might spend months calculating the ideal match for his child, consulting lawyers and astrologers alike to ensure compliance with both law and custom. Humor naturally arises in these negotiations. Imagine a young Roman bride, barely out of childhood, listening politely as her father haggles with another family over property, livestock, and a set of ceremonial utensils. The groom's family counters with their own list of demands, each more elaborate than the last. A servant whispers to the bride, "I hope your father doesn't trade you for 3 goats and a silver lamp." The bride stifles a laugh, aware that legally every detail counts, and that a mistake could cause scandal, fines, or social disgrace. Divorce in Rome was another regulated affair, And here, the absurdity and sometimes cruelty of Roman law becomes apparent. Both men and women could initiate divorce, though social expectations often favored men. Legal documents, witnesses, and formal declarations were required, creating a bureaucratic ritual around the end of marriage. Property, dowries, and children's custody had to be addressed, often resulting in negotiations that resembled high-stakes diplomacy rather than personal separation. A husband might leave with half the furniture, a wife might retain her dowry, and children could be legally reassigned to one parent or another, all according to codified law. And then there were the laws surrounding adultery. Adultery was not merely a private matter. It was a legal offense with potentially severe consequences. Women accused of adultery could face divorce, exile, or even public shaming. Men, by contrast, had more latitude, though public opinion and social networks still constrained behavior. Humor and dark comedy often thread through these situations. Imagine a magistrate trying to sort out conflicting testimonies. A husband claims his wife was unfaithful, the wife denies it, a servant testifies about seeing suspicious glances, and the children are utterly confused. The outcome could hinge on technicalities, social status, or the magistrate's sense of irony. Inheritance was yet another area where law shaped family life in ways both practical and bizarre. Romans meticulously documented wills, property transfers, and succession rights. Children could inherit, but only under certain legal conditions. Spouses had claims, but these were limited and regulated. The paterfamilias controlled property with almost absolute authority, dictating who received what and when. Imagine a son eager to claim his inheritance, only to discover that a clause in the will specifies he must first marry, produce heirs, and host a public feast according to ceremonial law. Compliance with absurdly specific requirements was not optional. Failure could nullify inheritance entirely. Even daily interactions were influenced by legal expectations. Fathers had the right to punish children under patria potestas, but the law also delineated limits. Corporal punishment was permissible, but public abuse or neglect could draw the attention of magistrates. Humor emerges in imagining a young Roman attempting to sneak a forbidden snack, only to be caught by a vigilant father armed with the letter of the law and a rolling pin. The balance between authority and absurdity defined family life, blending fear, humor, and social education. Roman law also intervened in the peculiar world of adoption, a common practice for ensuring heirs and securing alliances. Adoption was legally binding, sometimes transferring property, obligations, and family identity from one household to another. Imagine the scene. A young man, legally adopted into a new family, suddenly bound to follow customs, laws, and obligations of a household he barely knows. The new paterfamilias issues a long list of duties, ceremonial expectations, and legal obligations. Humor mingles with bewilderment. How does one navigate loyalty to one family while legally bound to another? Romans did so with ingenuity, humor, and occasionally creative loopholes. Divorce, remarriage, and inheritance disputes often created public drama, sometimes played out in the forum. Citizens argued over dowries, adultery, or wills. Magistrates intervened with long scrolls and stern expressions, and onlookers gossiped with relish. These events were social theater, legal spectacle, and family education all at once. The absurdity of codifying human emotion and personal conflict produces both humor and fascination. By mid-afternoon, the city hums with domestic complexity. Women manage households, children play under careful supervision, and fathers patrol their estates with legal precision. Outside, merchants, magistrates, and citizens interact under laws that touch every aspect of life. But inside each home, the law is a living force, shaping relationships, obligations, and even emotions. Every decision, every argument, every act of love or rebellion is legally contextualized. And yet, the Romans were nothing if not adaptable. Families navigated these rules creatively, bending them where possible, seeking loopholes, or quietly subverting them. A clever bride might negotiate a dowry adjustment. A cunning son might manipulate inheritance rules. A witty mother might influence the paterfamilias through social strategy rather than legal challenge. Law and ingenuity danced together, producing a society that was highly ordered yet endlessly human. As evening falls, imagine a patrician household preparing for dinner. Candles flicker, servants arrange couches and food, and the family gathers to discuss the day. Children recount minor misadventures, parents review obligations, and laughter threads through the conversation, even as everyone remains acutely aware of legal boundaries. This is life in Rome, a mixture of love, fear, compliance, creativity, and absurdity, all under the watchful gaze of the law. So, as you lean back in your chair, consider this. Roman family life was legal life. Marriage, divorce, inheritance, adoption, and daily domesticity were all shaped by statutes, decrees, and traditions codified in law. The system was strict, sometimes cruel, often bizarre, and yet it produced a society capable of immense complexity, humor, and adaptability. Next, we will leave the household and step into the bustling political life of Rome, exploring political power and peculiar election laws, where ambition, manipulation, and legal absurdity collide in the streets of the Forum. Morning in Rome begins with the clang of bronze, the chatter of merchants, and the restless shuffling of citizens making their way to the Forum. But today, the streets pulse not with trade or gossip, but with the tense energy of politics. Campaign banners flap, supporters shout slogans, and magistrates prepare to enforce laws governing one of the most chaotic aspects of Roman life: elections and political power. Yes, Rome, a civilization famed for grandeur and conquest, had a political system governed by rules so bizarre and specific that even seasoned citizens occasionally shook their heads in disbelief. The law dictated everything: who could run, how votes were cast, the order of speeches, acceptable bribes, and even the precise gestures candidates could use to woo the populace. Politics was theater, spectacle, and legal exercise all at once. Imagine the scene. A young patrician stands nervously on a wooden platform, addressing a crowd of citizens assembled in the Forum. His toga is pristine, his scroll of promises carefully rehearsed, his gestures calibrated to the letter of election law. A magistrate observes from the side, scroll in hand, ready to intervene if any rule is broken. And yes, in Rome, breaking election law could lead to fines, disqualification, or public disgrace. One law, for example, limited the number of gifts a candidate could distribute to voters. Too few, and the crowd might reject him. Too many, and he would be guilty of bribery. Imagine the tension. A patrician handing out olive jars, garum, and small coins, counting each item meticulously, calculating the exact legal number to avoid prosecution. A misstep could ruin a career before it began. Humor mingled with high stakes. The line between generosity and illegality was razor thin. Public speeches were similarly regulated. A candidate could not shout, gesticulate wildly, or make certain promises under penalty of law. Each movement, each word was potentially a violation. Imagine a politician attempting to rally voters while being hyper-aware of legal constraints, pausing mid-gesture to ensure compliance. The audience, fully aware of these rules, watched not only the content of the speech, but the legality of its delivery. Politics was a dance of words, gestures, and meticulous obedience. And then there were voting procedures. Citizens were divided into groups, tribes, centuries, or classes, with each group casting ballots in specific ways. Election laws mandated the order, timing, and method of voting. A miscount could invalidate an election. A technical breach could spark lawsuits that lasted for months. Citizens might spend entire days queuing, debating, and voting, all while navigating legal minutiae that could easily overwhelm even the most dedicated participant. Humor emerges naturally in this legal rigidity. Imagine a candidate carefully presenting his platform, only for a magistrate to step forward mid-sentence. Your hand gesture violates Lex Candidatus 3. Step back, adjust, and continue. The crowd stifles laughter. The candidate reddens but complies. Politics in Rome was a blend of ambition, fear, and absurdity, a world where legality and spectacle collided in spectacular ways. Bribery, corruption, and manipulation were common, yet paradoxically codified by law. Citizens could be punished for receiving bribes, but clever politicians often found loopholes, disguised incentives, or used subtle influence to sway voters legally, or at least without immediate repercussion. A citizen might accept a small gift, claiming it was hospitality rather than bribery, while a politician smiled behind a carefully worded statement. The law tried to maintain fairness, but human cunning thrived. Eligibility laws added another layer of absurdity. Only citizens of certain classes, age, and property status could run for office. A young, wealthy, ambitious man might find himself legally barred from election due to age or civic rank, while an older, less qualified individual could step in without challenge. The legal system, meticulous as it was, often clashed with the reality of human ambition, producing both tension and comedy. Senators, consuls, and magistrates all operated under specific legal constraints. Term limits, prohibitions on simultaneous office holding, and strict rules about conduct shaped the political landscape. But enforcement was uneven, leaving room for negotiation, clever interpretation, and occasionally outright defiance. Citizens and politicians learned to navigate these laws with ingenuity, sometimes bending them creatively without crossing the line into explicit violation. Politics became a legal game of strategy and social performance. Consider the campaign posters, slogans, and public endorsements, all of which had legal parameters. Citizens could not print false statements, insult opponents excessively, or make promises that violated existing statutes. But witty wording, clever phrasing, and subtle exaggeration were perfectly legal and widely used. Humor, strategy, and legal precision intertwined, turning the campaign trail into a theatrical, often absurd stage. Public assemblies, another cornerstone of Roman politics, were also regulated. Citizens had to gather in specific locations at specific times under supervision. Speaking out of turn, arriving late, or failing to follow protocol could result in fines, temporary exclusion, or legal censure. Imagine the chaos of a popular assembly if everyone ignored the rules. Laws existed precisely to maintain order, though enforcing them was often comically complex. Election disputes, too, were codified. A losing candidate could legally contest results, citing technical infractions, procedural errors, or miscounted votes. Magistrates would then adjudicate in public hearings, often drawing crowds eager to witness legal drama unfold. Imagine a tribunal filled with citizens, scribes, and officials, listening to lawyers argue over the legality of a candidate's hand gestures or the placement of campaign banners. Justice, theater, and absurdity coexisted seamlessly. The combination of rules, loopholes, and human ambition produced endless stories of political ingenuity. Candidates bribed subtly, manipulated legal texts, and staged events to comply with law while swaying public opinion. Citizens learned to read between the lines, enjoying the spectacle of ambitious men navigating a labyrinth of statutes and social expectation. Politics became a blend of legal chess, public theater, and human comedy. And so, as the sun sets over the forum, the bustling energy fades. Candidates retreat to private homes, citizens disperse, and magistrates review scrolls, noting violations and drafting fines. The city seems calm, but the laws linger like shadows over every corner. Even in the quiet of evening, Roman politics hums with tension, absurdity, and the constant presence of legal oversight. As you sit back, lamp flickering beside you, consider this. Roman elections were more than a means to distribute power. They were a microcosm of the entire legal universe, a spectacle where ambition, human creativity, and absurdly detailed law intersected in ways both fascinating and darkly humorous. The system was meticulous, sometimes ridiculous, yet endlessly engaging. Next, we will explore the laws that governed clothing, public appearance, and social status. Because in Rome, even your toga could land you in legal trouble. And yes, the consequences could be both hilarious and terrifying. Morning in Rome arrives with the familiar clatter of carts over cobblestones, the shouts of merchants selling bread, olives, and garum, and the scent of the Tiber mingling with smoke from hearths. But today, as citizens bustle through the streets, there is another invisible force shaping behavior, the law of appearance. In Rome, clothing wasn't merely fashion. It was legal regulation, social signaling, and occasionally absurd theater. Picture a patrician preparing to leave his domus. He unfolds a toga with meticulous care, ensuring the folds fall perfectly, the purple stripe aligned correctly. Why? Because the law dictates who may wear which toga. Purple, the color of emperors and high magistrates, is off-limits to ordinary citizens. Even a minor infraction, wearing a stripe too wide, draping fabric incorrectly, could result in fines or public scolding. Imagine the embarrassment of stepping into the forum with a slightly askew fold, only to be shouted at by a magistrate. "Your toga is illegal. Return home and adjust it, citizen, or face punishment." The humor is palpable, but the consequences were serious. Romans codified appearance for a reason: social order. Clothing signaled status, citizenship, and rank. Sumptuary laws regulating luxury and extravagance, prevented ordinary citizens from imitating the elite. Citizens could not wear expensive fabrics, ornate jewelry, or dyed garments unless legally permitted. Merchants and magistrates patrolled the streets, observing compliance, while neighbors whispered gossip about those who dared flaunt forbidden finery. Imagine a wealthy merchant trying to impress his peers, slipping a hint of purple into his cloak. A magistrate spots it immediately. Step aside, this is reserved for the elite. The crowd snickers, the merchant bows awkwardly, and legal precedent is enforced. Humor and social tension intertwine seamlessly in Roman life. Law is the stage, and citizens are performers. Clothing laws also applied to women, and here the absurdity deepens. Women were restricted in their choice of jewelry, fabrics, and ornamentation. Certain luxury items, gold, pearls, and silk, could only be worn by women of high status. Overstepping these boundaries could lead to public embarrassment, fines, or social disgrace. Picture a young Roman matron carefully counting pearls, weighing each piece against legal limits, while servants whisper advice. A single misstep could have consequences far beyond fashion. Even footwear was regulated. Shoes indicated status, profession, or civic role. Senators, magistrates, priests, and citizens each had specific footwear, and violating the rules, even unintentionally, was legally punishable. Humor emerges naturally. A clumsy plebeian accidentally wearing the wrong sandals to the forum might be corrected by a magistrate with dramatic flourish, drawing laughter from the crowd. But it wasn't all about punishment. The law also dictated proper attire for specific occasions. Festivals, sacrifices, funerals, and political assemblies each had clothing rules. Citizens had to dress appropriately or face legal censure. Imagine a young citizen arriving at a festival in casual attire, only to be stopped by a magistrate. Wrong garment. You will either return home or pay a fine for disrespecting sacred tradition. The scene blends humor, ritual, and legal absurdity, an everyday reality for Romans. Sumptuary laws even governed color choices beyond purple. Certain dyes were restricted. Wearing forbidden colors signaled ambition, arrogance, or social misstep. Magistrates enforced these laws with precision, issuing fines or public warnings. Picture a citizen unknowingly choosing a slightly illegal hue, only to be publicly corrected while trying to defend his taste. The law transformed color into a civic responsibility. Clothing regulations were also tied to citizenship and class. Plebeians, freedmen, and slaves had distinct clothing restrictions, ensuring visible social hierarchy. Slaves could not wear jewelry or high-quality fabrics. Freedmen had limited access to public colors and ornaments. Plebeians had their own legal limitations. The streets became a visual map of Roman social order, with magistrates ensuring that citizens wore their identity on their sleeves, literally. And humor wasn't confined to daily life. Romans themselves recorded amusing anecdotes about clothing infractions. One story tells of a young man fined for wearing his toga too long, causing him to trip in the forum. Another recounts a merchant whose extravagant cloak prompted a magistrate to issue a theatrical warning. Even as these laws were serious, the absurdity of human interaction and enforcement created endless stories of laughter, ingenuity, and occasional mischief. Regulations extended to hair, grooming, and cosmetics. Certain hairstyles signified rank. Illegal haircuts could provoke censure. Women's hair and makeup were also subject to social scrutiny, with fines or gossip following improper adornment. Imagine a young Roman woman trying a new hairstyle only to be warned by a passing magistrate, "That curl is for the Vestal virgins, adjust it immediately." Again, humor mingled with social tension. And here's a twist. Enforcement was not always consistent. Magistrates sometimes applied laws rigidly, sometimes leniently, depending on social status, personal judgment, or public spectacle. This inconsistency became part of Roman life. Citizens learned to navigate rules creatively, bending the law when possible without overtly breaking it. Clever citizens could wear slightly extravagant garments, tweak hairstyles, or display wealth subtly, avoiding fines while asserting status. Ingenuity became part of appearance itself. Even children were subject to clothing laws. Boys and girls had to wear age-appropriate garments. Stepping outside of expectations could provoke correction or fines for parents. Imagine a young boy excitedly wearing a miniature toga meant for older citizens, only to be caught by his father and corrected with a mix of humor and legal authority. The line between obedience, social expectation, and comedy was finely drawn. By afternoon, the streets of Rome are a tapestry of cloth, color, and status. Magistrates patrol with scrolls in hand, merchants negotiate over fabrics, and citizens adjust garments anxiously before entering public spaces. Even in leisure, clothing is a legal statement. Every fold, color, and ornament signals identity, rank, and compliance. Rome has codified fashion into law, transforming daily life into a subtle performance of civic obedience. And yet, despite all these regulations, Romans found ways to be creative. Subtle adjustments, clever accessorizing, and strategic placement of colors allowed citizens to express individuality within legal boundaries. Humor, human ingenuity, and social awareness thrived alongside regulation, turning daily dressing into a complex interplay of law, creativity, and social signaling. As evening falls, merchants close stalls, citizens return home, and magistrates review infractions. The forum quiets, but the laws linger, visible in the folds of togas, the glint of jewelry, and the careful gestures of every citizen. Rome is a city where clothing is law is theater, and citizens are actors, performing a daily dance of compliance, creativity, and sometimes absurdity. So, as you lean back in your chair, imagining the perfect fold of a toga, the shimmer of legal jewelry, or a magistrate's dramatic correction, remember this. In Rome, appearance was more than aesthetics. It was law, hierarchy, and social order. Break the rules, and the consequences could be social, financial, or publicly humiliating. Follow them, and you walked the delicate path of status, legality, and civic grace. Morning dawns over Rome, the air thick with the mingled scents of bread, fish, and garum. The streets pulse with life. Merchants hawk their wares, citizens barter over coins, and the forum hums like a living organism. But beneath the chatter and commerce lies a hidden layer, the labyrinth of Roman commerce laws. Absurd, meticulous, and occasionally terrifying. Step into the marketplace. A merchant arranges his olives, a fishmonger displays fresh catch glistening in the sun, and a young citizen hesitates before buying a loaf of bread. What he doesn't see is the invisible hand of the law hovering over every stall, dictating prices, measurements, product quality, and even acceptable methods of selling. One misstep, a misweighed coin, a short measure of oil, could bring fines, public shaming, or worse. Imagine a magistrate strolling through the market, scroll in hand, eyes scanning for violations. A vendor accidentally uses a scale slightly off by a few grams. The magistrate approaches. You cheat the people. Adjust your measure or face the penalty. The crowd gasps. Some stifle laughter. Others murmur about past infractions. In Rome, even a minor clerical error could trigger legal and social consequences. The Romans codified commerce for practical reasons: fairness, order, and prevention of fraud. Yet the specificity of these laws often produces humor centuries later. There were rules about how merchants could advertise, how much they could charge, and even how they could display goods. Merchants were required to honestly label their products, weigh items correctly, and avoid deceptive practices. One can almost picture a fishmonger nervously adjusting his scales while an impatient magistrate notes every gram. But the absurdity deepens with regulations about market conduct. Citizens could not haggle excessively. They could not shout, wave, or use gestures deemed disruptive. Even the arrangement of goods followed legal expectations. Imagine a young merchant meticulously organizing jars of olives by size and color, while keeping one eye on the magistrate to ensure compliance. Humor emerges naturally. A merchant trips over a crate, a fish falls into the dust, and a magistrate shakes his head, penning another entry into the record of violations. Some laws addressed pricing. Overcharging was illegal, punishable by fines or confiscation of goods. Yet, undercharging could also violate law if it was seen as destabilizing the market. Merchants walked a legal tightrope. Too much, too little, or improperly advertised, and they faced consequences. Creativity and ingenuity became survival tools. A merchant might cleverly bundle items to maximize profit while technically staying within legal boundaries. Weights and measures were a constant source of regulation and comedy. Imagine a street lined with jars of oil, baskets of grain, and stacks of pottery. Every item must be precisely measured. Scales must be calibrated. Units of measure strictly followed. A single miscalculation could trigger fines, and clever merchants would sometimes attempt subtle adjustments to increase profit without overtly breaking the law. Citizens, too, learned to watch for discrepancies, bargaining cleverly, and sometimes reporting violations to gain advantage. Even specialized trades had their unique regulations. Bakers, butchers, and fishmongers all faced industry-specific statutes. Bakers had to weigh loaves correctly. Butchers were prohibited from mislabeling meat. Fishmongers could not sell old or spoiled fish. Enforcement was visible, public, and occasionally theatrical. Picture a magistrate dramatically seizing a loaf of bread from a baker's stall, while the baker protests, the crowd chuckles, and children whisper about the spectacle. Commerce in Rome was equal parts law, morality, and entertainment. But merchants were not defenseless. Clever legal maneuvers, alliances with fellow traders, or subtle bribery could help navigate the web of regulations. Roman commerce laws were strict on paper, but flexible in practice. Those who understood loopholes and precedent could thrive, while others faced ruin for minor missteps. This interplay of rigidity and creativity defined the economic life of the city. Humor also arises from the social dynamics these laws created. Imagine a young apprentice selling jars of honey, nervously watching his master haggle under legal scrutiny. A citizen attempts to bargain aggressively, only to be reminded by the magistrate, "Respect the law, citizen, or pay the fine." The crowd titters, the apprentice sweats, And the master sighs. Another day in the legally regulated marketplace of Rome. Some laws were downright bizarre. Merchants could be fined for selling goods at night without a permit, or for displaying food in a way that offended public decorum. Street vendors had to navigate complex permits, civic approvals, and periodic inspections. The absurdity is clear. A citizen attempting to sell figs at twilight without permission could face legal consequences, while the same figs sold at dawn are perfectly acceptable. Timing, order, and compliance were everything. Enforcement was public and performative. Magistrates would patrol, weigh goods, issue fines, and occasionally confiscate wares. The theater of enforcement provided entertainment, cautionary tales, and social education simultaneously. Citizens learned early that commerce was a regulated performance. Missteps were visible, consequences immediate, and humor inevitable. Even payment methods were regulated. Coinage had to be authentic, coins could not be debased, exchange rates were controlled. Merchants accepting counterfeit coins faced legal action. Citizens handing them out unknowingly risked fines. Imagine a young shopper nervously counting silver denarii, aware that a misstep could trigger financial and legal calamity. Money itself was a legal object, and commerce a game of vigilance. Beyond regulation, Roman commerce laws aimed to protect society. Public health, fairness, and moral order were paramount. Spoiled fish, overcharging, or disruptive sales threatened both economy and community well-being. Yet, the specificity of enforcement, the obsessive attention to scale, timing, and decorum, creates modern amusement. A magistrate fining a baker for a loaf 1 gram too light is serious in context, but absurd from a contemporary perspective. By late afternoon, the market hums with cautious, regulated energy. Merchants clean stalls, adjust scales, and review goods. Citizens haggle carefully, mindful of legal limits. Magistrates patrol, scrolls in hand, eyes sharp for violations. Laughter, negotiation, and occasional chaos thread through the day, producing a living spectacle of law, commerce, and human ingenuity. As night falls, merchants close shops, pack wares, and return home. Citizens disperse, coins exchanged, bargains completed, minor infractions noted and corrected. The streets quiet, but the invisible web of law lingers. Roman commerce is a constant dance of vigilance, creativity, and humor, a reminder that even buying a loaf of bread could be a legally complex, socially delicate, and absurdly entertaining endeavor. Rome. A city of grandeur, marble, and politics, but also a city where the law wielded terrifying, bizarre, and sometimes absurdly comical power over criminals and miscreants. Imagine walking through the streets of the Forum on a bright morning. Citizens chat, merchants sell, children play, and somewhere, just beyond the bustle, a magistrate prepares to enforce laws that make modern audiences gasp, laugh, and shudder all at once. The Romans were meticulous about punishment. Crime was not merely wrongdoing, it was a disruption of social order, a breach of communal harmony, and they had an entirely unique approach to maintaining order. Minor theft, you might face fines, forced labor, or public shaming. Major crime, exile, execution, or the creative horrors of Roman imagination. The law was strict, theatrical, and often personalized to suit the offense. Take theft, for instance. A man caught stealing a loaf of bread might not simply be fined. He could be publicly humiliated, forced to wear a sign declaring his crime, or marched through the forum for citizens to witness. Imagine the spectacle: neighbors pointing, children giggling, and the magistrate reading aloud from a scroll of legal precedent. Even minor offenses became performances, part of the civic theater designed to deter future crime. More serious crimes invited creative punishments. Romans invented methods that ranged from the pragmatic to the absurd. A common punishment for arson, fraud, or treason was death, but never in a boring, uniform way. Citizens convicted of serious crimes could be executed in public, yes, but sometimes in ways designed to humiliate, entertain, and warn all observers. Picture the tension. A crowd gathers, murmuring, while the condemned stands on a platform, awaiting judgment. The law is spectacle. Punishment is a moral lesson and civic entertainment intertwined. Then there's exile, a punishment with both legal and social implications. A wealthy citizen committing a politically inconvenient act might be legally banished, forced to leave Rome and live elsewhere. The law ensured enforcement, but enforcement was not always practical. Exile could be ignored, circumvented, or even treated humorously in social gossip. Picture a citizen waving sarcastically from across the Tiber, declaring, "I'm technically in exile, but I prefer the forum view." Even punishment could be performative. Public shaming deserves a chapter to itself. Romans understood that embarrassment could be more effective than death. Citizens caught lying, cheating, or minorly offending could be paraded through the forum, forced to wear ridiculous signs, or subjected to humiliating tasks. Imagine a man who attempted to cheat at dice, forced to recite his crime while balancing a pot of water on his head. The crowd laughs, magistrates note precedent, and justice is done, both legally and socially. Humor and deterrence intertwine seamlessly. Criminal law also extended to moral offenses. Adultery, impiety, and disrespect to the gods were punishable under Roman law. Women accused of adultery could face divorce, fines, or exile, while men had slightly more latitude. But public scandal remained a powerful tool. Picture a priest discovering a citizen disrespecting a shrine. The law requires a formal ritual apology, fines, and sometimes public service. Religion and law fused into one, producing consequences both absurd and deeply serious. Even violence was legally regulated. Assault, murder, and duels all had codified consequences, with punishments often reflecting the social status of the perpetrator and victim. A fight between slaves might result in corporal punishment. A brawl between patricians required fines, restitution, or formal apology. The law ensured hierarchy, but also inspired dark humor. Imagine two senators dueling with wooden sticks under public scrutiny, while a magistrate carefully notes infractions. Note: Senator A strikes above shoulder. Illegal. Civility, legality, and absurdity coexist perfectly. Property crimes produced both practical and theatrical outcomes. Stealing livestock, damaging crops, or tampering with goods invoked fines, restitution, and sometimes public humiliation. One famous anecdote describes a thief forced to walk through the market wearing the stolen object, announcing his guilt. Citizens laughed, neighbors gossiped, and magistrates ensured that the law served both justice and entertainment. And yes, Roman law could be downright bizarre. Certain offenses, like using magic against another citizen, insulting officials, or spitting in the street, were codified with surprisingly specific punishments. Imagine a citizen fined for casting a hex at a neighbor, forced to pay tribute and apologize publicly in a ritualized ceremony. The absurdity is clear, yet enforcement was taken seriously. Law, morality, and theater fused seamlessly in the Roman worldview. The law also regulated punishments according to class. Slaves faced harsher consequences for minor infractions, while citizens enjoyed procedural safeguards. A slave caught stealing might be whipped, branded, or executed. A free citizen could face fines or temporary exile. Legal hierarchy mirrored social hierarchy, reinforcing power while offering darkly humorous contrasts when enforcement seemed inconsistent or ironic. Even capital punishment had creative flair. Execution by crucifixion, burning, or exposure to wild animals was not merely punishment. It was a spectacle, a warning, and a performance of justice. Citizens watched, magistrates oversaw, and the law was enforced with dramatic flair. Humor in modern retelling arises from the absurd creativity of Roman methods, though the consequences were deadly serious. But Romans also allowed for clever avoidance of punishment. Bribery, legal loopholes, and social connections could reduce fines, commute sentences, or allow criminals to escape exile. Imagine a wealthy patrician negotiating with magistrates, smiling through his misdeeds, and leaving the forum unscathed. Law was strict, but human ingenuity always found a way. Humor, survival, and social manipulation intertwined seamlessly. By afternoon, the forum is alive with public spectacles, minor criminals paraded, magistrates issuing fines, and citizens gossiping eagerly. Stories circulate about foolish thieves, hapless fraudsters, and overconfident youths who failed to navigate Roman law. The theater of punishment creates a vivid civic lesson, educating citizens about compliance, morality, and the consequences of breaking rules, while also entertaining the population. As night falls, the city quiets. Magistrates retire to review scrolls, and the punished return to homes or exile. The streets seem calm, but the laws linger, invisible, watchful, and occasionally absurd. Rome is a city where crime is a performance, punishment is theater, and legality threads through every interaction, producing a society both fascinating and darkly humorous. So, as you lean back in your chair, lamp flickering beside you, remember this: Roman law was equal parts justice, morality, and spectacle. Every offense was codified, every punishment theatrical, and every citizen reminded that even minor transgressions could provoke absurdly detailed consequences. Law was a living, breathing, often comical presence in the city, unforgiving, yet endlessly inventive. Rome. A city of stone, marble, and the eternal hum of devotion. Temples rise above forums, altars glow with the flicker of incense, and citizens move through streets where every step, gesture, and word is potentially subject to divine scrutiny and legal consequence. Welcome to the strange, meticulously regulated world of Roman religion, where law, superstition, and civic duty collide in ways both serious and absurd. Imagine a citizen waking at dawn. He dresses carefully, preparing to visit the household shrine. He carries offerings, a small loaf of bread, a pinch of incense, perhaps a few figs. Every action, lighting the flame, placing the bread, reciting the prayer, is legally, socially, and religiously prescribed. A misstep could anger the gods, offend neighbors, or violate law. In Rome, religion was never merely personal. It was codified, communal, and enforceable. Roman law dictated proper worship in meticulous detail. Festivals, sacrifices, and ceremonies were scheduled according to the calendar, and missing one could be a civic offense. Citizens had to participate appropriately in public rites, observe fasting periods, and honor the gods in specific ways. Imagine a young man rushing through the forum, juggling work and devotion, aware that failing to salute Jupiter correctly could result in censure, or at least gossip. Even piety was legalistic. The law also regulated the roles of priests, priestesses, and religious officials. Certain acts, sacrifices, readings of auguries, or ritualized gestures could only be performed by authorized personnel. Attempting to conduct a ceremony without sanction was not just disrespectful, it was illegal. Picture a citizen attempting to bless his olive harvest, interrupted by a flustered priest waving a scroll. Stop! Only a pontifex may perform that ritual. Humor and tension intersect seamlessly in Roman religious life. Public ceremonies were theatrical, legal, and socially binding. Festivals honoring gods like Jupiter, Mars, or Vesta required precise sequences of offerings, prayers, and performances. Mistakes were taken seriously. Improperly slaughtering an animal, using the wrong incense, or misplacing an offering could trigger legal complaints. Imagine a magistrate inspecting the site of a ritual, making notes, while citizens whisper about the absurd precision required. Religion, law, and theater are inseparable in this world. Divination, reading omens, observing birds, interpreting lightning, was also regulated. Augurs and haruspices, official diviners, performed duties under legal sanction. Ordinary citizens could not interpret omens independently in public, nor could they claim divine favor without authorization. Humor arises in imagining a citizen observing birds in his backyard, only to be scolded by a magistrate. That's a public omen. Leave the birds to the professionals. Even nature was subject to law. Sacred spaces, temples, and altars were governed by property law and divine protection. Destroying or misusing a temple was illegal, punishable by fines, exile, or execution in extreme cases. Imagine a hapless carpenter accidentally spilling lime over an altar. The crowd gasps, magistrates scribble on scrolls, and the carpenter bows deeply, apologizing. Humor and fear mingle. Even accidents had legal consequences. Religion intersected with social hierarchy in curious ways. Certain offices, rituals, and privileges were reserved for patricians, senators, or priests. Plebeians and freedmen had specific limits on participation. Wearing priestly garments, claiming divinely sanctioned authority, or performing unsanctioned rituals could land citizens in legal and social trouble. Picture a freedman attempting to participate in a festival reserved for patricians, quickly escorted away by a magistrate while the crowd snickers. Social boundaries, divine law, and legal enforcement converge in absurdly precise ways. Sacrifices and offerings were also legally regulated. Animals had to be the correct species, age, and quality. Food offerings had to meet prescribed standards. Violating these rules could provoke both divine displeasure and legal penalty. Imagine a citizen attempting to sacrifice a small goat, only to be stopped by a priest checking age and health. The humor is obvious, but the consequences were taken seriously. Mistakes in religious law were no trivial matter. Religious festivals themselves were codified to the hour. Missing or misaligning rituals could be interpreted as disrespect or impiety and legally actionable. Picture a family rushing to the festival of Saturnalia, juggling work, domestic chores, and legal obligations. One slip, a forgotten offering, and the local magistrate might intervene. The performance of religion was thus a constant dance between devotion, compliance, and social expectation. There were also strict laws regarding omens and curses. Magic, maledictions, and attempts to influence divine will could lead to fines, exile, or execution. Imagine a citizen accused of hexing a rival through subtle gestures or whispered words. Legal proceedings ensue, neighbors gossip, and magistrates meticulously determine guilt. Absurd? By modern standards, yes. Serious in Roman context? Absolutely. Law, magic, and morality were intertwined. Priestly offices themselves were regulated by law, including election, tenure, and duties. The Vestal virgins, for example, held a sacred role with strict legal and moral expectations. Failing in ritual duty, breaking vows of chastity, or mishandling sacred fire could result in extreme punishment, including burial alive in certain historical instances. Imagine the terror of strict legal enforcement mixed with religious devotion. The stakes were life, reputation, and divine favor simultaneously. Even temples themselves were subject to property law and civic oversight. Citizens could not modify, sell, or misuse sacred spaces. Building shrines without permission, diverting offerings, or mismanaging sacred property was illegal. Magistrates patrolled religious districts, ensuring compliance, while citizens whispered about minor infractions. Humor lurks in the meticulous enforcement, ritual, legal oversight, and performance. Citizens attend temples, perform offerings, and carefully navigate divine law. Magistrates patrol, scribes record, and priests observe. Even casual behavior, spitting in the street, stepping on sacred ground, or using certain words, could invoke legal attention. Every interaction with the divine was legally contextualized. And yet, Romans were adaptive and creative. Citizens navigated laws with ingenuity, finding ways to honor the gods, express devotion, and maintain social standing without breaking legal boundaries. Clever ritual arrangements, timing adjustments, and strategic participation allowed ordinary people to comply while retaining personal expression. Humor and ingenuity thrived under strict regulation, producing a society where law, religion, and human creativity intertwined seamlessly. As evening falls, incense smoke drifts from temples, citizens return home, and magistrates review infractions. The city seems calm, yet law, ritual, and divine expectation linger invisibly. Rome is a city where the gods watch, the law enforces, and citizens improvise, balancing fear, devotion, humor, and ingenuity. So, as you lean back, lamp casting shadows across your space, remember this: in Rome, divine law and human law were inseparable. Missteps were socially visible, legally actionable, and occasionally hilarious. Piety was regulated, creativity was constrained, and humor was found in navigating an intricate web of celestial and civic oversight. Rome, the city that conquered continents, built roads across mountains, and ruled seas. Yet behind every disciplined legion stood an army not just of soldiers, but of laws. Laws so detailed, bizarre, and occasionally absurd that the modern mind might struggle to keep a straight face. Welcome to the world of Roman military regulation, where courage, strategy, and legalistic exactitude collided with humor, hierarchy, and human ingenuity. Picture dawn breaking over a Roman camp. Soldiers rise in unison, armor, and prepare for inspection. Each man carries weapons, a pack, and the invisible weight of the law. Discipline is enforced with rigor. Stepping out of line, wearing the wrong equipment, or failing to salute an officer could lead to punishment. Yet, beyond these practical concerns, the law dictated minutiae that bordered on the absurd. Take marching, for instance. Soldiers had to maintain specific distances, cadence, and formation, not just for military effectiveness, but because the law mandated it. Imagine a cohort moving through the hills. A man slightly off step could be corrected by a centurion with a sharp gesture, while nearby comrades stifle laughter. Order, law, and humor exist side by side. Discipline enforced through both authority and absurd precision.
Weapon regulations were equally meticulous. Soldiers were expected to maintain swords, shields, and armor in exact condition, with specific cleaning routines and inspections. A neglected sword, a dented shield, or improperly strapped helmet could lead to fines, extra duties, or ceremonial humiliation. Picture a soldier nervously polishing armor, aware that the slightest smudge could provoke a centurion's reprimand. Law and life intermingle, producing tension and humor. Even camp hygiene was legally mandated. Latrines had assigned schedules, tents had specified arrangements, and cooking fires had precise distances from sleeping areas. Soldiers faced punishments for disorder, spillage, or breach of camp protocol. Imagine a legionary adjusting his tent peg, tripping over a neighboring soldier's pack, while a centurion records the offense on a tablet. Comedy, vigilance, and discipline combine seamlessly. But some laws were downright peculiar. Soldiers could face punishments for improper beard length, hairstyle, or footwear. Yes, Rome codified appearance not only for civilians, but for its military. A soldier with a slightly too long beard might face reprimand, while those with dirtied or misaligned boots could receive extra duties. Humor emerges naturally. The absurdity of legal enforcement applied to hair and sandals amidst the chaos of war. The law also regulated sleeping arrangements and watch duties. Soldiers could not shirk guard duty, swap tents at will, or neglect assigned positions. The consequences were serious: loss of rank, fines, or corporal punishment. But the practical enforcement often included comical situations. Picture a soldier falling asleep mid-watch, a centurion tapping him awake, scroll in hand. Violation of Lex Custodia 9. Record the infraction and resume duty immediately. Discipline and absurdity intertwine perfectly. Military contracts, pay, and benefits were legally codified. Soldiers were expected to keep logs, attend briefings, and maintain equipment according to exact specifications. Pay irregularities could be contested, contracts disputed, and legal loopholes exploited. Imagine a veteran carefully counting denarii, ensuring the ledger aligns with statute. Even financial fairness was a legal performance. Officers had their own layer of regulation. Centurions, tribunes, and legates were bound by codes specifying leadership behavior, punishment authority, and ceremonial conduct. Deviate even slightly, issue a command out of turn, misplace a banner, or improperly discipline troops, and legal complaints could follow.
Officers had to balance command, law, and public perception, often resulting in humorous tension between authority and procedural minutiae. Combat itself was regulated in surprising ways. Soldiers had to follow chain of command, adhere to formation, and obey signals precisely. Disobedience, even if tactically effective, could trigger legal censure. Imagine a legionary taking initiative during a skirmish, only to be chastised later for violating protocol. Courage and legal rigidity coexisted, producing an environment where bravery had to navigate bureaucracy as carefully as enemy lines. Even logistics were under scrutiny. Supplies, weapons, rations, and transport animals had assigned management protocols. Negligence in provisioning could result in fines, extra labor, or public shaming. Picture a soldier misplacing a pack of grain, centurions consulting scrolls, and fellow soldiers chuckling at the bureaucratic chaos amidst battlefield preparation. Law permeated every aspect of military life, from the mundane to the heroic. Military punishments themselves were creative and theatrical. Desertion, insubordination, or theft could result in flogging, reduction of rank, or decimation, the infamous practice of executing 1 in every 10 men to enforce discipline. Imagine the tension and terror, coupled with the awe of strict legal enforcement. Humor is darker here, subtle, emerging from the absurd precision of codified cruelty rather than the act itself. Soldiers also had rules regarding civilian interaction. They could not interfere with local markets, insult citizens, or violate property laws. Breaches could provoke legal action, fines, or restitution orders. Picture a legionary politely refraining from taking a roasted pig, while a centurion scowls at subtle, overeager behavior. Civilians, soldiers, and law interact in a delicate, sometimes absurd ballet. By afternoon, the camp hums with lawful energy. Soldiers polish armor, march in formation, tend equipment, and perform duties under careful supervision. Magistrates, centurions, and scribes patrol, enforce, and record, ensuring every law, no matter how peculiar, is observed. Humor arises naturally. A soldier trips over a tent rope, another misplaces a helmet, yet all remain under the meticulous gaze of Roman legal authority. As evening falls, the camp quiets, fires flicker, and soldiers prepare for night watches. Scrolls are reviewed, punishments recorded, and protocols rehearsed for the next day. The city outside may sleep, but the invisible presence of law in the army persists. Rome is a city where military might is inseparable from legal precision, where absurdity and vigilance coexist, and where every soldier is both warrior and actor on a stage of rules, rituals, and social expectation. So, as you recline, imagining the gleam of armor, the precise fold of a shield, and a centurion noting a minor offense with dramatic flourish, remember this. Rome's military laws were a fusion of discipline, absurdity, and ingenuity. Courage and legality walked hand in hand, humor threaded through vigilance, and every soldier navigated a world where obedience was both life-saving and occasionally ridiculous. Rome, a city of bustling streets, towering temples, and grand politics, but behind every domus, behind every meal, and behind every well-polished floor, there exists a maze of family laws so detailed, so bizarre, and so socially precise that modern minds would marvel at their absurdity. Welcome to domestic Rome, where the law governed not just public life, but the intimate world of households, marriages, and inheritance. Imagine a morning in a Roman domus. The paterfamilias rises, robe wrapped precisely, eyes scanning the family for transgressions before coffee, or whatever passed for it, is prepared. Children, slaves, and wives are all legally bound in roles codified by centuries of statute. Family life was a constant negotiation with law, where minor slips could trigger fines, disputes, or social embarrassment. Marriage in Rome was not merely a personal affair. It was legally binding, socially scrutinized, and ridiculously detailed. Citizens needed official consent, witnesses, and formal contracts to marry. Certain marriages were forbidden, between close relatives, between citizens and slaves in illegal configurations, or in ways that violated property expectations. Imagine a young couple nervously awaiting witnesses while the paterfamilias inspects their paperwork, ensuring every iota of legality is met before the ceremony begins. Humor and tension interweave seamlessly. Divorce laws were equally fascinating. Roman citizens could dissolve marriages, but the procedures were precise. Formal declarations, witness presence, and careful accounting of property division. Humor emerges in imagining a quarrelsome couple awkwardly negotiating property, slaves, and jewelry under watchful eyes while neighbors gossip. Social consequences, legal consequences, and domestic absurdity intersect perfectly. Parent-child relationships were legally codified in minute detail. The paterfamilias had extensive authority, potesta, over children, even into adulthood. Fathers could arrange marriages, control property, and discipline as prescribed by law. Yet even minor acts of rebellion could result in legal or social friction. Picture a teenager sneaking out at night to visit the forum, only to face a parent's legal threat. Step out of line, and I'll invoke my full authority under Lex Patris. The tension and humor are unmistakable. Inheritance laws were notoriously complex. Romans carefully codified how property, slaves, and wealth passed from generation to generation. Ignoring these rules could trigger disputes, family feuds, or lengthy litigation. Picture a will read aloud in the atrium. Everyone listens, eyes sharp, as each item, tableware, land, jewelry, is allocated according to law. One misstatement could provoke outrage, humorous confusion, or legal appeal. Property, family, and law dance together in a precise, sometimes absurd choreography. Slavery within the household added another layer of legal intrigue. Slaves were legally property, yet laws dictated treatment, duties, and punishment. Certain household tasks were restricted, and mistreatment could provoke legal scrutiny if the slave's owner misused authority. Humor arises in imagining a clever slave navigating domestic law, avoiding excessive punishment while subtly outmaneuvering masters. Even in serious hierarchies, wit and ingenuity flourished. Dowries, gifts, and property transfers were legally regulated, producing endless minor disputes. A bride's dowry had to be accounted for. Gifts to children or servants had to follow formal rules. Imagine a matron presenting a dowry incorrectly, while the paterfamilias mutters legal curses, scribes adjust scrolls, and neighbors whisper scandal. Social tension, law, and humor intersect effortlessly. Even dining arrangements and household behavior could carry legal implications. Excessive display of wealth, misuse of slaves, or improper hospitality could provoke fines or social censure. Picture a family hosting a dinner. Bread broken incorrectly, wine poured out of sequence, servants tripping, all technically minor infractions, yet legally and socially significant. Roman domestic law codified civility itself, producing order, tension, and humor simultaneously. Family rituals, too, were legally observed. Festivals honoring household gods, Lares and Penates, required precise offerings, prayers, and sequences. Failure could provoke divine disfavor and social criticism. Imagine a young son dropping incense into a fire at the wrong moment, mother gasping, father scolding, and family priest scribbling notes. Religion, law, and domestic comedy merge seamlessly in the everyday life of a Roman household. Education within the household was legally guided as well. Children needed proper tutors, oversight, and moral instruction. Failure to comply with expected standards could provoke legal consequences for parents. Picture a young boy learning Latin grammar while a magistrate's inspector checks scrolls, ink stains, and pronunciation. The absurdity of legal intrusion into education is palpable, yet enforcement was taken seriously. Even the punishment of domestic misbehavior followed detailed statutes. Misconduct by children, slaves, or wives could invoke fines, corporal punishment, or social embarrassment, but the law specified exactly how. Imagine a servant spilling oil during meal preparation, disciplined according to rule, while family members simultaneously lecture, laugh, and gossip. Legal absurdity, domestic order, and human humor entwine perfectly. Adultery and infidelity laws were particularly peculiar. Women could face exile, fines, or loss of property. Men had more latitude, but still risked public scandal. Imagine a husband attempting to catch a cheating wife, navigating legal options, social gossip, and personal embarrassment. The law transformed private affairs into public spectacle, producing tension, absurdity, and civic theater in equal measure. By late afternoon, the Roman domus hums with legalized activity. Children complete schooling, slaves perform duties under scrutiny, property is inventoried, and the paterfamilias oversees rituals. Laws are invisible yet omnipresent, guiding behavior, mediating disputes, and enforcing social hierarchy. Humor thrives in minor mishaps, misunderstandings, and the endless negotiation between human imperfection and legal precision. As evening falls, the household gathers for dinner. Scrolls are reviewed, disputes resolved, and minor infractions noted for future correction. The domus, seemingly calm, remains a theater of law, social expectation, and humor, where every action, word, and gesture is potentially legally significant. Family life in Rome was a performance, guided by statutes, observed by peers, and occasionally absurdly funny. So, as you recline and imagine the carefully choreographed chaos of a Roman household, remember this. Domestic life was legally structured, socially enforced, and threaded with humor. Every meal, ritual, and conversation carried weight. Every action navigated law, morality, and social expectation. Rome was a city where even the most intimate moments of life were regulated, absurd, and fascinating. Rome, a city of grandeur, bustling markets, and sprawling villas. Yet beneath the gleaming marble and bustling streets lies a world of property laws so detailed, so bizarre, and so socially entangled that even the most careful citizen could stumble into legal chaos. Welcome to the world of Roman land, houses, gardens, and legal disputes, where ownership was codified, regulated, and occasionally hilariously complicated. Imagine a wealthy Roman waking at dawn in his villa. He walks through the peristyle garden, inspecting fountains, potted plants, and statues. Every inch of land is owned, measured, and legally documented. The law dictates boundaries, inheritance rights, and even the permissible use of trees, walls, and paths. Picture a neighbor edging too close with his olive grove. A magistrate might later issue a ruling, scroll in hand, measuring the exact distance of the offending branch. Humor and law coexist beautifully here. Property in Rome was more than bricks and soil. It was a status symbol, an investment, and a legal responsibility. Owning land brought rights, but also obligations. You could not simply fence off a field or build a wall at whim. Laws dictated access, easements, water rights, and usage restrictions. Imagine a frustrated citizen attempting to expand his garden, only to discover a legal precedent forbidding construction within a few feet of a neighbor's fountain. Legal absurdity and human frustration intertwine seamlessly. Boundary disputes were common and legally intricate. Romans recorded property limits with precision, using markers, inscriptions, and legal documents. Yet, nature, negligence, or mischief could easily blur lines. Picture a mischievous neighbor moving a marker stone slightly each night, the owner waking in confusion, and magistrates eventually summoned to resolve the dispute. The law demanded precision, but human ingenuity and mischief ensured entertainment. Roman property law also extended to common spaces. Roads, public fountains, and shared pastures had strict legal protections. Encroaching on public land, misusing communal resources, or claiming ownership of shared property was punishable. Imagine a farmer cutting branches over a public path, magistrates noting infractions while neighbors snicker. Law, society, and humor interweave like the threads of a mosaic. Inheritance and land division added another layer of complexity. Families often held property collectively, and Roman law meticulously dictated how land passed from one generation to the next. Ignoring these rules could trigger disputes, lawsuits, or prolonged litigation. Picture a will read aloud under the atrium's open sky. Cousins squabble over parcels, neighbors watch eagerly, and magistrates scribble notes. Humor, human folly, and legal precision coexist in perfect tension. Building regulations were another domain of absurd detail. Homes could not exceed certain heights, walls had to follow prescribed thickness, and neighboring structures could not obstruct light or water flow. Imagine a citizen trying to add a second story, only to be halted by legal inspectors measuring with rods and scales. Compliance, creativity, and frustration dance together in every construction project. Water laws were equally specific. Ownership of wells, aqueduct access, and irrigation rights were codified in statutes. Diverting water improperly could provoke legal action, fines, and public embarrassment. Picture a citizen caught redirecting a stream to water his garden, neighbors complaining, magistrates intervening, and the accused sheepishly adjusting pipes. Absurdity and legality entwine effortlessly. Renting, selling, and leasing houses or shops required contracts, witnesses, and adherence to strict laws. Attempting to bypass regulations could void agreements or trigger penalties. Imagine a merchant attempting to rent a shop near the Forum, negotiating terms, checking scrolls, and worrying that a minor oversight could render the lease invalid. Roman law ensured fairness, but also produced absurdly meticulous bureaucracy. The law even addressed nuisance and noise. Loud neighbors, stray animals, or obstructive constructions could prompt legal complaints. Magistrates enforced regulations, often issuing detailed judgments about the height of walls, placement of fences, or allowable barking hours. Picture a frustrated dog owner navigating such legal intricacies while neighbors snicker. Humor emerges naturally from the intersection of law, domesticity, and civic oversight. Disputes over trees and gardens were surprisingly common. Certain trees could not be cut, fruits harvested without consent, or branches encroaching on neighbors' land required legal resolution. Imagine a man trimming his olive tree, unaware that Roman law forbade encroaching branches, even by a single finger's width. Magistrates are called, measurements are made, and justice, precise, absurd, and meticulous, is delivered. Tenancy and rental laws were equally precise. Landlords had responsibilities for maintenance, safety, and lawful use. Tenants were required to adhere to specific conditions, with legal consequences for violations. Imagine a tenant painting a wall the wrong color, or allowing a garden to grow wild, prompting legal notices and formal inspections. Compliance was not optional, and humor emerged from the minor absurdities of enforcement. Even small details were regulated. Paths, gates, storage areas, and ornamental features could fall under legal scrutiny. Property owners navigated a dense web of statutes designed to maintain order, fairness, and social harmony. Imagine a gardener misplacing a statue slightly off-center. Neighbors file complaints, magistrates review, and the absurd precision of Roman property law is revealed in full theatrical glory. By afternoon, courts are busy resolving disputes. Olive branches, garden walls, water streams, rental contracts, and minor trespasses. Magistrates wield law with precision, citizens nervously watch, and neighbors gossip eagerly. Every property conflict is a microcosm of Roman life, blending absurdity, law, and social performance. As evening falls, the city quiets. Villa gates close, gardens are inspected, and magistrates review scrolls. Yet property laws linger invisibly, shaping behavior, mediating disputes, and producing endless opportunities for humor. Rome is a city where ownership is legally sacred. Disputes are inevitable, and human creativity ensures that the law is both respected and continually tested. So, as you recline, imagining measured olive groves, precise garden walls, and magistrates measuring every misplaced stone, remember this: Roman property law was meticulous, socially enforceable, and occasionally absurdly funny. Every garden, path, and house carried legal weight, and the city thrived on a delicate balance of precision, human ingenuity, and social performance. Rome, a city alive with the clatter of wheels, the shouts of vendors, and the aroma of spices, bread, and fish. Yet beneath this vibrant commerce lies a world of trade laws so precise, so bizarre, and so socially enforced that even the most careful merchant could trip over legal minutiae and fall into comic chaos. Welcome to the bustling, regulated, and occasionally absurd world of Roman commerce, where law, profit, and human ingenuity collided daily. Imagine entering the forum in the morning. Merchants arrange stalls with care, displaying textiles, pottery, and exotic imports. Buyers haggle, observers gossip, and magistrates patrol, ensuring every transaction, bargain, and sale complies with strict Roman statutes. Even the act of weighing coins or measuring grain is legally bound. Mismeasurement could lead to fines, public shaming, or loss of license. Humor emerges naturally when a merchant accidentally tips the scale, the magistrate scribbles notes, and neighbors whisper scandal. The Romans were meticulous about weights and measures. Scales, weights, and containers had to meet precise standards. A merchant caught cheating, even unintentionally, could face fines, forced restitution, or public humiliation. Imagine a baker selling flour slightly over the stated amount. Neighbors notice, the magistrate intervenes, and the situation becomes a civic spectacle. Accuracy was law, compliance was performance, and humor lurked in minor mishaps. Trade in certain goods carried extra legal oversight. Luxury items like silk, spices, and wine were taxed, monitored, and regulated. Merchants required licenses to sell, and infractions were prosecuted rigorously. Picture a trader attempting to smuggle a crate of exotic figs past a magistrate. Scrolls are consulted, scales are checked, and the absurdity of bureaucracy emerges amidst commerce. The law was both a hurdle and a theater, producing tension, humor, and spectacle. Contracts were another domain of regulated absurdity. Sale agreements, loans, and commercial partnerships required witnesses, written documents, and sometimes notarized guarantees. Failing to follow protocol could void a deal, trigger fines, or spark litigation. Imagine two merchants negotiating a fish sale while a scribe carefully records every word, noting even the tone of delivery. Precision, legality, and human awkwardness collide in ways modern audiences might find both charming and ridiculous. Merchant fraud was strictly punished. Selling spoiled food, fake goods, or counterfeit coins carried legal and social consequences. Picture a fishmonger caught selling smelly, unsellable fish. Neighbors howl with laughter, magistrates consult scrolls, and the culprit is forced to apologize publicly while replacing the goods. Humor, law, and human error intersect seamlessly in the marketplace. Markets themselves were legally regulated spaces. Vendors had assigned stalls, opening hours, and rules about noise, cleanliness, and safety. Ignoring these laws could provoke fines or eviction. Imagine a young apprentice spilling olive oil across a market aisle. Magistrates intervene, buyers grumble, and the spectacle becomes a teaching moment for all. Law structured commerce, but human unpredictability produced constant amusement. Trade in certain professions had specialized laws. Barbers, blacksmiths, cobblers, and innkeepers all followed regulations specific to their craft. Imagine a barber trimming a client's hair too short. Legal standards dictate the fine, restitution, and ceremonial apology. The law ensured professionalism, but also provided rich opportunities for humorous mishaps, gossip, and spectacle. Transportation of goods was another legally complex area. Carriages, pack animals, and boats were subject to regulations regarding weight limits, routes, and storage. Failing to follow the rules could provoke fines or confiscation. Picture a merchant's donkey collapsing under excess cargo. Magistrates record infractions, neighbors laugh, and the merchant carefully reloads under strict scrutiny. Absurdity and legality intertwine in everyday commerce. Trade disputes were inevitable, and Roman law had solutions. Courts adjudicated over stolen goods, unpaid debts, and misdelivered shipments. Magistrates carefully weighed evidence, listened to witnesses, and issued judgments, sometimes absurdly detailed. Imagine a case where a merchant claims his amphora of olive oil was sabotaged by a rival. Testimony, scales, and witnesses all contribute to a dramatic, socially rich spectacle. Legal absurdity and human cleverness dance together perfectly. Even casual commerce was regulated. Street vendors, traveling peddlers, and informal trades were subject to oversight. Selling without a license, overstating prices, or creating hazards could provoke fines. Picture a baker hawking bread from a cart, inadvertently blocking a road. Magistrates measure the obstruction, neighbors complain, and the baker apologizes while balancing humor and legality. Every transaction is a miniature theater of law, observation, and human error. Taxation was intimately connected to trade. Merchants had to pay customs, sales taxes, and tariffs, each monitored carefully. Evading taxes could lead to severe punishment, while minor mistakes could produce elaborate court proceedings. Imagine a spice trader miscalculating a tariff by a single coin. Scrolls are reviewed, witnesses called, and the minor error becomes a civic spectacle. Humor and tension coexist seamlessly. Roman law also addressed consumer protection. The quality of goods sold, accuracy of labeling, and honesty in transactions were legally mandated. Selling rotten fish, underweight grain, or counterfeit pottery could provoke fines, restitution, or public shaming. Imagine a vendor caught mislabeling dates. The magistrate reads aloud the charges while neighbors laugh. The vendor protests, and law enforcers both justice and spectacle. By afternoon, markets hum with activity. Merchants bargain, buyers haggle, magistrates patrol, and scribes record. Every coin, measure, and gesture is potentially legally significant. Disputes erupt, resolutions are made, and humor thrives amidst bureaucracy. The city's commercial life is a constant interplay of law, ingenuity, and social theater. As evening falls, stalls close, goods are secured, and magistrates compile records. Yet the invisible threads of trade law linger, shaping behavior, mediating disputes, and ensuring order. Rome is a city where commerce is not just about profit. It is about precision, legality, and clever navigation of absurd minutiae. So, as you recline, imagining scales, amphora, bustling aisles, and vigilant magistrates, remember this: Roman trade law was meticulous, socially enforced, and often hilariously specific. Every transaction carried legal weight, every error invited scrutiny, and the city thrived on the constant tension between human cleverness and legal exactitude. Rome, a city that thrived on spectacle, from the roar of gladiators in the Colosseum to the laughter echoing in theaters. Entertainment was a civic duty as much as an amusement, and, unsurprisingly, it was heavily regulated. Welcome to the world of Roman entertainment laws, a place where legal precision, public expectation, and human absurdity intersected daily, producing moments both thrilling and downright ridiculous. Picture the morning in the bustling city. Citizens gather at the entrance to the theater, coliseum, or circus. Excitement hums in the air, but alongside it is an invisible web of laws, regulating everything from ticket distribution to crowd behavior, performance content, and even audience attire. Imagine a magistrate pacing, scroll in hand, inspecting the queue for infractions. A citizen wearing the wrong toga might be denied entry, while another accidentally blocks the entrance and faces a fine. Humor and civic oversight coexist seamlessly. Theatrical performances were carefully scrutinized. Plays had to follow laws dictating content, no offensive satire against magistrates, no blasphemy against the gods, and no excessive disruption to public order. Imagine an actor delivering a line slightly too pointed, eliciting whispers from the crowd, while a magistrate scribbles notes in the margin of a legal scroll. Humor and tension thread through the seemingly innocent act of performing. Even seating arrangements were legally codified. Citizens were assigned specific tiers according to status. Senators, equestrians, plebeians, and slaves each had their section. Attempting to sit in the wrong place was a legal and social offense. Picture a young man accidentally wandering into the senatorial tier. Whispers ripple through the crowd. A magistrate approaches, and the young man hastily retreats, red-faced. Order, law, and humor coexist in the ritual of public entertainment. Gladiatorial games carried their own legal complexities. Gladiators were technically property, bound by contracts and subject to strict regulations governing combat. Rules dictated weapons, duration, and permissible techniques. Imagine two gladiators squaring off, weapons clashing, while a referee, a legal officer, monitors compliance with intricate statutes. Humor lurks in minor infractions. A misstep, a dropped shield, a creative dodge not covered in law. Spectacle and legal oversight blend perfectly. Chariot races were another domain of regulated chaos. Drivers had to follow lanes, adhere to speed regulations, in theory, and obey signals from officials. Minor infractions, intentional or accidental, could provoke fines, public censure, or forced penalties. Picture a driver swerving wildly, a magistrate waving a scroll, and the crowd erupting in laughter, tension, and exhilaration. Law attempts to control chaos, yet chaos thrives spectacularly. Laws also extended to animal use in public spectacles. Lions, tigers, and exotic beasts were subject to safety and property regulations. Improper handling could provoke fines or accidents with serious consequences. Imagine a tiger handler accidentally letting a paw rest on the wrong platform, officials scribbling frantically, and the crowd cheering nervously. Humor, fear, and legal enforcement coexist in thrilling balance. Street performances, music, and public festivals carried minor but strict regulations. Noise levels, crowd sizes, and performance content were legally monitored. Picture a lyre player whose song drifts too loudly into the forum. A magistrate waves a scroll, citizens chuckle, and the performer adjusts tone, humor mingling with civic oversight. Law threads through even the most artistic moments. Admission fees, vendor placement, and concessions were regulated meticulously. Selling food, drink, or souvenirs without license was punishable. Imagine a young vendor selling roasted chickpeas near the Colosseum. Magistrates check his scrolls, neighbors snicker, and he sheepishly complies. The law ensures fairness, but provides abundant opportunity for humor in everyday interactions. Public holidays and festivals were also legally mandated events. Games, plays, and spectacles could not be arbitrarily scheduled or canceled without legal sanction. Imagine a sudden storm forcing a performance delay. Magistrates adjust scrolls, performers improvise, and citizens grumble. Compliance, adaptation, and minor absurdity create a uniquely Roman tableau. Audience behavior was under legal oversight too. No shouting obscenities, no obstructing views, and no physical harassment of participants or neighbors. Failure could provoke fines, public shaming, or removal from the venue. Picture a citizen clapping too loudly, a magistrate scribbling a note, and the crowd exchanging amused glances. Humor arises naturally from the absurdity of regulating enthusiasm. Even ceremonial elements of games and performances were regulated. Sacrifices before events, rituals honoring gods of theater and sport, and proper decorum were legally required. Neglect could provoke fines or social criticism. Imagine a ritual misstep. Incense placed incorrectly, a priest muttering, and the audience quietly observing the minor chaos. Religious law, entertainment, and social performance intersect in charming absurdity. Punishments for performers breaking laws were theatrical themselves. Improper content, violations of contracts, or audience disruption could provoke fines, public apology, or suspension. Imagine a playwright fined for offending a magistrate. He reads a public apology, audience giggles, and the law is reinforced amidst laughter. Law enforces spectacle, while spectacle enforces social norms. By afternoon, theaters, arenas, and circus tracks hum with life. Actors rehearse, gladiators spar, chariots circle, and citizens follow precise seating protocols. Magistrates patrol, scribes record infractions, and minor absurdities abound. Every action, from applause to animal handling, carries potential legal significance. Humor, law, and social ritual are inseparable. As evening falls, venues empty, scrolls are filed, and inspectors review the day. Yet the invisible presence of entertainment law persists, ensuring fairness, mediating disputes, and shaping citizen behavior. Rome is a city where spectacle is not merely amusement. It is a legally regulated, socially performed, and sometimes absurdly complex enterprise. So, as you recline, imagining the clash of swords, the roar of chariots, and a magistrate scribbling notes at every misstep, remember this: Roman entertainment laws combined rigor, social order, and humor in a dazzling display of regulation. Spectacle, law, and human creativity existed in an endless, entertaining dance that continues to fascinate us today. Rome. The streets, forums, and piazzas teemed with life. Merchants shouting prices, children chasing stray dogs, senators debating loudly, and citizens performing the rituals of daily urban life. But lurking beneath the hustle and bustle was a labyrinth of laws regulating public behavior, often so detailed, absurd, and socially enforced that a casual misstep could earn a fine, a scolding, or outright embarrassment. Welcome to the curious, peculiar, and often hilarious world of Roman civic regulation. Imagine a bright morning on the Via Sacra. Citizens walk briskly, chariots clatter past, and vendors call out their wares. You, dear listener, are navigating the crowd, and suddenly, the law makes itself known. One cannot simply stroll through the street without observing codified rules: which lane to walk in, how to salute magistrates, and even how loudly to converse. A misstep might provoke a fine, a public rebuke, or the amused attention of neighbors. Humor and legal precision coexist seamlessly. Noise was a legal concern. Shouting in public without cause, singing at inappropriate times, or using horns excessively could trigger legal intervention. Imagine a baker enthusiastically singing to advertise his bread. A magistrate scribbles notes on a scroll, citizens smirk, and the baker carefully adjusts his volume. The law curtails chaos, but also highlights human creativity in its execution. Public urination? Forbidden. Not just frowned upon, but legally prohibited in designated areas. Slaves and citizens alike were bound to comply. Imagine a young man caught mid-act by a passing official, fines issued, embarrassment endured, neighbors laughing silently, and the law asserting dominance over basic human impulses. Humor, social order, and civic oversight converge naturally. Dress codes were another peculiar aspect of public behavior law. Citizens were expected to wear appropriate garments according to class, age, and occasion. Senators had to wear the toga praetexta, ordinary citizens, simpler garments. Wearing the wrong robe, sandals, or hairstyle could provoke fines or social censure. Imagine a young man accidentally donning a senator's toga. Neighbors whisper, magistrates frown, and the young man hurriedly retreats, a vivid lesson in the intersection of law and daily life. Salutations and gestures were legally regulated. Citizens had to acknowledge magistrates, priests, and certain elders with proper gestures. Failing to bow, nod, or verbalize greetings could provoke punishment. Imagine a traveler so engrossed in conversation that he forgets to salute a passing magistrate. The official scribbles furiously while the crowd chuckles. Civility, law, and humor coexisted in everyday interaction. Even the act of spitting in public carried restrictions. Spit on the streets, floors of temples, or within public buildings could lead to fines or demands for public apology. Picture a citizen, surprised by a sneeze, accidentally spitting near a sacred altar, while neighbors whisper, scribes record, and he blushes furiously. Human impulse, legal enforcement, and social observation intersect absurdly. Walking dogs, legally regulated. Dogs had to be leashed, muzzled if aggressive, and kept from blocking footpaths. Imagine a dog excitedly chasing a stray chicken. The owner struggles, neighbors complain, and magistrates scribble notes, all while the city continues unabated. Humor naturally arises from minor conflicts between law and animal behavior. Public seating was legally controlled. Citizens could not claim benches, public steps, or market stalls arbitrarily. Attempting to occupy a reserved area might provoke fines or public embarrassment. Picture an older man shooing a younger citizen from a public step, scrolls consulted, neighbors giggling, and legal order maintained amidst minor absurdity. Littering was a serious concern. Discarded food, pottery shards, or waste in inappropriate areas could provoke fines or restitution. Imagine a child accidentally dropping a bit of bread, a magistrate noting the incident, and neighbors laughing at the over-application of law to tiny chaos. Even minor infractions were codified, demonstrating Rome's meticulous approach to public order. Regulations even extended to conversation and public debate. Citizens could not speak disrespectfully to officials, propagate certain rumors, or disrupt civic ceremonies. Imagine a citizen over-enthusiastically critiquing a magistrate's decision. The law intervenes, witnesses scribble testimony, and neighbors quietly stifle laughter. Civic discourse and humor entwine, demonstrating the peculiar nature of Roman law. The use of public spaces for games, exercise, or informal sports was also regulated. Balls, boards, and dice required careful adherence to local ordinances to prevent disruption. Picture a young boy accidentally hitting a passing citizen with a ball. Legal reprimand follows, neighbors chuckle, and the boy scurries away. Humor emerges naturally from the tension between play and law. Public protests and assemblies required legal sanction. Citizens could not simply gather in the forum to complain. Permits, designated areas, and witness oversight were mandatory. Imagine a small crowd attempting to voice grievances without permission. Magistrates intervene, scrolls consulted, and civic procedure is reinforced, producing both tension and absurdity. Even minor acts of courtesy carried legal weight, helping an elder cross the street, offering a seat in public transport, or adjusting a mislaid cart could be socially rewarded or formally noted. Imagine a young citizen carefully assisting a neighbor. Scrolls remain unwritten, yet observers whisper approval, illustrating how legal and social norms blended seamlessly. By afternoon, Rome hums with regulated activity, streets filled with measured steps, citizens greeting magistrates, children playing cautiously, and dogs obediently leashed. Minor infractions occur, witnesses laugh, magistrates intervene, and social harmony is maintained. Humor, law, and everyday life coexist in perfect balance. As evening falls, streets empty, shops close, and scrolls are filed. Yet the invisible web of public behavior law persists, guiding citizens, enforcing order, and producing daily comedy. Rome is a city where every step, gesture, and conversation carries potential legal significance, ensuring a balance of civility, social expectation, and minor absurdity. So, as you recline, imagining scrolls in magistrates' hands, citizens nervously adjusting behavior, and neighbors quietly chuckling at minor infractions, remember this. Roman laws governing public behavior were meticulous, socially enforced, and often delightfully peculiar. They reveal a civilization obsessed with order, civility, and the occasional absurdity of daily life. Rome. A city where every street corner, hilltop, and household altar teemed with divinity. Gods of war, love, harvest, and fortune watched over citizens, and naturally, the law extended into the sacred realm. Welcome to the fascinating, sometimes baffling, and occasionally absurd world of Roman religious laws, where reverence, ritual, and legal precision intertwined daily. Imagine approaching the forum at dawn. Priests prepare sacrifices, citizens bow, and the smell of incense wafts through the air. Yet, lurking behind every ritual is a complex legal web, codifying what can and cannot be offered, how sacrifices should be performed, and a precise timing of each chant or libation. A misstep could provoke divine disfavor, or, at the very least, a fine. Humor and ritual blend effortlessly in this sacred bureaucracy. Temple access was legally regulated. Only certain citizens could enter specific sanctuaries. Priests had strict codes of conduct, and rituals had to be observed in exact sequence. Imagine a tourist-style citizen wandering into a temple, unaware that his sandal color violates local law. A priest frowns, scrolls are consulted, and the visitor retreats. A vivid illustration of law enforcing both decorum and divine respect. Sacrificial offerings had bizarrely precise requirements. Animals had to be of specific age, gender, and health. Grain, wine, and incense needed precise measurement. Misplacing a twig, dropping a coin incorrectly, or performing a chant slightly off rhythm could be legally significant. Picture a novice priest carefully adjusting a chicken, grain, and wine while a senior observes, scroll in hand, noting every tiny infraction. Humor naturally emerges from meticulous enforcement of ritual law. Festivals, from Saturnalia to Lupercalia, were heavily codified. Citizens had to follow designated roles, schedules, and behaviors. Failing to comply could provoke legal or social consequences. Imagine a participant attempting to improvise a dance or chant. Magistrates observe, priests record, neighbors whisper, and the festival proceeds with a blend of order and playful absurdity. Law ensures tradition, but human creativity tests its limits daily. Clerical attire was legally enforced. Priests, augurs, and flamens had prescribed garments, headpieces, and ornaments. Forgetting a toga, misplacing a headband, or wearing the wrong color could provoke reprimands or fines. Imagine a priest attempting to adjust a cumbersome headdress mid-sacrifice. Scrolls quiver under the weight of legal precision, humor blooms, and ritual continues. Temple maintenance carried its own legal intricacies. Floors had to be swept, altars cleaned, and sacred spaces arranged according to law. Neglect could provoke fines or social embarrassment. Picture a temple assistant accidentally spilling incense, a magistrate noting the error, and neighbors quietly stifling laughter. Humor, devotion, and legal obligation intertwine seamlessly. Religious conduct in public was also regulated. Worshippers could not blaspheme, make improper gestures, or disturb ceremonies. Imagine a citizen accidentally sneezing during a prayer. Priests scribble notes, neighbors giggle, and the law subtly asserts order over human imperfection. Minor absurdities, divine oversight, and legal attention coexist beautifully. Animal behavior in sacred spaces was regulated too. Chickens, sheep, and other sacrificial animals were legally restricted from wandering, defecating, or making noise at the wrong time. Picture a nervous chicken hopping onto a priest's altar, magistrates scribbling, and worshippers laughing softly. Humor emerges naturally from the tension between life, ritual, and legal enforcement. Offerings from households were also legally bound. Citizens could not give improper gifts to deities, miscalculate quantities, or perform rituals at forbidden times. Imagine a family attempting a small home sacrifice. Incense burns too long, wine spills, and the paterfamilias consults a scroll for exact timing. Domestic devotion and law intersect amusingly and meticulously. Legal oversight extended to divination and augury. Priests had to interpret signs according to precise rules, from the flight of birds to the entrails of animals. Misinterpretation could provoke fines, social disgrace, or delays in civic decisions. Imagine an augur squinting at a bird, scroll in hand, muttering, "Lex augurium inex requires careful observation. Don't sneeze now." Law todifies divine interpretation, while human error and humor persist. Religious holidays influenced commerce and public gatherings. Certain activities were forbidden. No markets, no legal disputes, no public entertainments during sacred times. Imagine a merchant accidentally selling grain during a festival. Scrolls are consulted, fines issued, and neighbors chuckle at the minor blunder. Humor, law, and ritual coexist in everyday life. Priestly punishments were often theatrical. Misconduct, negligence, or incorrect ritual performance could provoke fines, temporary suspension, or public apology. Imagine a priest accidentally spilling wine during a festival. A minor penalty is enforced while neighbors exchange wry smiles. The absurdity lies in the meticulousness of law applied to sacred acts. By afternoon, temples hum with regulated activity. Worshippers perform precise rituals, priests adjust garments, animals are monitored, and magistrates patrol. Even minor infractions, from spilled incense to misaligned offerings, carry legal weight. Humor, devotion, and civic oversight intertwine naturally. Even small details mattered: placement of votive candles, arrangement of statues, or alignment of sacred symbols. Neglecting these could provoke fines, embarrassment, or corrections. Imagine a young assistant rearranging a minor statue slightly off axis, priests scribbling notes, and citizens whispering amusement. The law's reach is meticulous, and absurdity thrives in human imperfection. As evening falls, temples quiet, fires burn low, and scrolls are filed. Yet the presence of religious law lingers, guiding behavior, mediating disputes, and ensuring proper devotion. Rome is a city where every prayer, sacrifice, and gesture carries potential legal significance, blending reverence, social order, and the occasional comic mishap. So, as you recline, imagining flickering candlelight, careful offerings, and magistrates scribbling notes in shadowed alcoves, remember this: Roman religious laws combined meticulous ritual, social enforcement, and human absurdity in a tapestry of devotion, regulation, and charm that continues to fascinate. Rome, a city of law, order, and social hierarchy, where the consequences of breaking statutes could be as dramatic, peculiar, and absurd as the laws themselves. Welcome to the world of Roman punishments, a blend of spectacle, deterrence, and sometimes dark humor, where magistrates, executioners, and citizens participated in a legal theater that was as instructive as it was entertaining. Imagine a magistrate pacing the forum at dawn, scrolls in hand, officials whispering, and citizens nervously adjusting their robes. Breaking the law in Rome wasn't merely a private affair. It was a public matter, often observed, adjudicated, and performed with precision. Minor offenses could trigger fines, public shaming, or forced labor. Major infractions carried more elaborate consequences. Humor and human anxiety coexist seamlessly in this legal spectacle. Fines were the most common punishment, yet even these had peculiarities. Citizens could be fined for minor offenses, like stepping into the wrong lane, singing too loudly, or neglecting civic duties. Imagine a baker fined for spilling flour on the forum. Scrolls are consulted, witnesses testify, neighbors chuckle, and the law demonstrates its meticulous reach into everyday life. Small mistakes, large reactions, and social observation entwine perfectly. Corporal punishment was carefully codified. Beatings, whippings, and public floggings followed strict legal protocols, often performed under witness supervision to ensure legality. Imagine a misbehaving slave subjected to a public reprimand. Magistrates observe, neighbors watch, and the victim, though suffering, becomes part of a civic lesson. Humor, tension, and human ingenuity emerge naturally in these dramatic spectacles. Exile was another legal tool. Citizens could be banished for crimes, political missteps, or even social offenses. Imagine a minor politician arguing with a senator, later declared persona non grata. Scrolls are read aloud, belongings packed, neighbors gossip, and the exiled figure disappears dramatically. Exile enforces law while producing social theater and subtle humor. Confiscation of property often accompanied criminal punishment. Lands, houses, and possessions could be seized by the state for misbehavior or political dissent. Imagine a wealthy merchant losing his carefully measured olive groves due to minor infractions. Magistrates adjust scrolls, neighbors murmur, and the absurdity of legal consequence unfolds. Ownership, law, and social observation intersect in vivid ways. Public humiliation was a surprisingly common tool. Citizens caught committing offenses could be paraded, branded, or forced to apologize publicly. Imagine a man accused of lying about grain weights. He stands in the forum, scroll read aloud, audience smirks, and justice is performed with civic theater. Humiliation serves as punishment, spectacle, and social instruction simultaneously. Imprisonment was strictly regulated. Detention facilities were functional but closely monitored by magistrates. Even small infractions could lead to temporary confinement, while major crimes carried extended sentences. Imagine a citizen locked briefly for accidentally obstructing a sacred procession. Scrolls are checked, neighbors gossip, and the absurdity of strict enforcement is clear. Humility, humor, and law coexist. Execution, the most severe consequence, followed elaborate legal protocols. Citizens accused of murder, treason, or other serious offenses faced carefully codified procedures. Gladiatorial arenas, public squares, and execution sites became stages where law, spectacle, and civic observation intersected. Imagine a condemned criminal awaiting judgment. Magistrates consult scrolls, witnesses testify, audience murmurs, and the ritualized nature of justice becomes apparent. Even in severity, legal absurdity and social performance persist. Certain punishments were peculiarly creative. The Lex Julia et Poppaea, for example, imposed fines for unmarried citizens failing civic duty. Other laws required peculiar tasks as penance. Imagine citizens performing odd tasks, like maintaining public monuments or attending mandatory religious ceremonies, under legal compulsion. Humor emerges from creativity, civic order, and absurd enforcement. Punishments were also stratified by social class. Slaves faced harsher penalties than citizens. Nobles sometimes received more lenient treatment, but law demanded documentation, scrolls, and witness testimony for all. Imagine a minor noble committing a misdemeanor. Magistrates deliberate carefully, citizens gossip, and law enforces inequality with meticulous record-keeping. Social hierarchy, law, and human drama intertwine seamlessly. For minor civic infractions, odd but effective methods were used. Being forced to wear specific garments, stand in public, or perform repeated apologies. Imagine a man who misuses public water, forced to wear a sign describing his offense while the crowd observes. Humor, shame, and law are entwined beautifully, producing lessons that linger socially and legally. By afternoon, the city hums with punishment in various forms. Fines recorded, minor reprimands performed, magistrates consult scrolls, and citizens navigate carefully. The visible and invisible hand of law maintains order, produces humor, and teaches social compliance. Even small infractions become opportunities for civic theater. Legal consequences also extended to business and property. Merchants caught cheating, failing to meet weights, or selling spoiled goods faced confiscation, fines, or public apology. Imagine a trader embarrassed in the forum, scroll read aloud, neighbors smirking, and law instructing behavior through both financial and social means. Commerce, law, and social observation blend seamlessly. Punishments could be cumulative. A single offense might trigger fines, minor corporal punishment, and public apology. Imagine a citizen committing multiple minor infractions on a festival day. Magistrates consult scrolls meticulously, witnesses record, neighbors whisper, and the absurdity of compounded legal oversight is fully revealed. Humor, tension, and civic performance coexist vividly. Even small mistakes carried weight. Stepping incorrectly during a ritual, misplacing a public sign, or singing too loudly in the forum could provoke minor but legally documented consequences. Imagine a man accidentally tripping while adjusting his toga. Magistrates record the incident, neighbors whisper, and civic life continues with precision and humor. As evening falls, scrolls are filed, fines accounted for, and magistrates review the day's events. Yet the presence of punishment laws lingers, guiding citizens, enforcing compliance, and producing daily civic theater. Rome is a city where law is both deterrent and spectacle, blending consequence, humor, and social order in a delicate, meticulously recorded dance. So, as you recline, imagining magistrates pacing the forum, citizens nervously adjusting behavior, and minor absurdities unfolding with each passing hour, remember this. Roman punishments combined legal precision, social observation, and human creativity in ways that enforced order while often amusing, instructing, and delighting simultaneously. Rome, a city of grandeur, bustling streets, monumental architecture, and, most importantly, laws that permeated every facet of life, from the marketplace to the temple, from private villas to public forums. After journeying through peculiar property regulations, bizarre trade rules, intricate entertainment statutes, socially enforced public behavior, religious oversight, and creatively peculiar punishments, it's time to pause, reflect, and appreciate the full spectacle of Roman law. Picture yourself reclining in a quiet atrium as twilight falls. The distant hum of the city, the faint scent of incense from a nearby temple, the last echoes of a chariot rolling down the cobbled streets. In this serene moment, consider the sheer scope, detail, and sometimes absurdity of the laws that structured Roman life. What lessons do they offer? What do they reveal about human behavior, social order, and the Roman obsession with precision? First, consider the meticulousness. Every action, from trimming an olive tree to offering incense to a god, was potentially regulated. The Romans left nothing to chance. Markets, property, entertainment, public spaces, and sacred rituals were all codified. The sheer level of detail suggests a civilization intensely aware of human fallibility, intent on creating order from chaos. Humor naturally emerges here. A chicken hopping onto an altar, a young boy misplacing a market scale, or a citizen accidentally blocking a temple entrance. All minor infractions scrutinized under the watchful eye of law. The Romans understood that human nature is unpredictable, and law is the scaffolding keeping civic life upright. Second, consider the blending of law and social performance. Roman law was not merely bureaucratic, it was spectacle. Punishments were public, magistrates were visible, and minor infractions could provoke laughter, gossip, or whispered admiration. A citizen fined for spilling flour, a vendor caught mislabeling goods, or a young noble miswearing a toga became part of a civic theater where law educated, entertained, and socialized. The absurdity of some punishments, wearing signs, public apologies, ritualized humiliation, highlights the human creativity underlying enforcement. Law was not only about compliance, but about shaping social consciousness, often through humor. Third, consider the moral and ethical dimension. Roman law often reflected values and priorities of the society: honesty in commerce, respect for elders, observance of religious rites, and maintenance of social hierarchy. Even absurdly specific rules, like noise limits in public, precise measurements for offerings, or seating arrangements in theaters, serve to reinforce collective values. They remind us that law is more than prohibition. It is an expression of cultural norms. Observing how meticulously Romans codified everyday life encourages modern readers to reflect on the invisible rules guiding our own behavior, often unnoticed but equally influential. Fourth, consider the interaction of law with human imperfection. Romans understood that mistakes happen. Children misstep, animals wander, merchants miscalculate, priests fumble rituals. Their laws often anticipated error, creating mechanisms for correction, restitution, or minor spectacle. Humor arises naturally from this tension. A magistrate meticulously measuring an olive branch encroaching on a neighbor's land, a chariot driver swerving in a race, a citizen accidentally disrupting a sacred ceremony. The Romans laughed with the law, and sometimes at it, revealing an understanding of the human condition that transcends millennia. Fifth, consider the lasting fascination of Roman absurdity. From peculiar trade rules to bizarre punishments, from temple rituals to public seating, Roman law offers endless material for reflection. It teaches us that civilization requires rules, but humans will always find ways to test them, bend them, or stumble into them accidentally. The laws are precise, but the stories they produce are human, messy, humorous, dramatic, and instructive. In studying them, we glimpse the everyday life of a people who, like us, sought order in chaos while navigating the absurdity of existence. Finally, consider the balance of reverence, humor, and authority. Romans respected their gods, magistrates, and elders, yet they codified and enforced laws with a precision that often bordered on the comical. A chicken hopping onto an altar, a merchant mislabeling goods, a citizen accidentally wearing the wrong toga. These moments, small but recorded, illustrate a civilization that understood the tension between human folly and societal expectations. Their laws are a mirror, part instruction, part theater, part enduring comedy. As you recline, eyes tracing the shadows of fading torchlight along marble columns, consider how these peculiar laws shaped the rhythm of life. They disciplined citizens, structured daily behavior, enforced morality, and even created humor. They made Rome orderly, yet lively, predictable, yet full of human surprise. They remind us that law, society, and human imagination are inseparable, each influencing the other in complex, beautiful ways. In closing, reflect on this. Roman law was a living organism, a web connecting citizens to magistrates, property to priests, markets to theaters, and humor to authority. Its peculiarity is its charm. Its absurdity is instructive. Its detail is a testament to the Roman obsession with order. Yet, underlying it all is the simple truth. Civilization thrives not just on laws, but on how humans interpret, navigate, and occasionally stumble within them. So, as you let the distant sounds of Rome fade into imagined night, remember, the streets, forums, and temples were alive with law, laughter, and human ingenuity. From olive groves to temples, markets to theaters, citizens walked a path of order and absurdity, guided by the invisible hand of meticulous statutes. History may remember emperors, wars, and monuments, but the peculiar, sometimes hilarious, laws of daily life remain as vivid echoes, whispering across millennia. And with that, dear listener, we close our journey through the strange, the precise, and the absurd. Rome is a city of laws, but also of humanity. The laughter, mistakes, ingenuity, and drama that make its legal tapestry endlessly fascinating. The story of Roman law is a reminder that order and absurdity often walk hand in hand, and that in every rule, ritual, and statute, there is a story waiting to be told.